Are we all welcome? Welcome to the 7th Annual Women in Leadership Summit for Asia 2021. My name is Taylor and I'm from the Women Leaders Institute, and I just want to thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to get things going, but first let me run through some housekeeping matters before handing you over to our chairperson for today. Now, I'm all sure you're familiar with Zoom, but we just need to tie up some things and keep note. So to ensure we are all present, listening and participating in the sessions and trying not to multitask in the background, please switch on your camera. That way we can all see each other. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking and when someone else is. When your microphone is on, do be mindful of background noises. I'd also like to encourage you to make use of this opportunity today to ask questions, interact and engage with one another, especially during the breakout sessions. As the saying goes, it's only as good as you make it to be. So you're in control of your learning today. Take the opportunity to tap into the collective brain power that we have in today's virtual room. You can ask questions using the chat function, or be brave enough to unmute yourself, turn your camera on, and ask questions during our allocated Q&A sessions. Climbing the leadership ladder will start at 12:55. You get to choose which discussion you want to be a part of. Either A, new leaders, B, middle to senior management, or C, top level management. During the breaks, we will open up mini breakout rooms to mimic in-person networking or casual conversations. If you're interested, please do stay logged on. All right, I'd now like to introduce your chairperson, Noor Quek. Noor currently heads NQ International, formed in October 2007. Its key activities include family office advisory services, business strategy for international corporations, and executive search services for senior level executives up to the C-suite. Key markets are Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Noor has more than 40 years of experience across key sectors of private banking, wealth management, and investment banking. Her expertise includes initiating, negotiating, and facilitating implementation of wealth advisory and financial transactions for international high net worth individuals, families, and corporations. Prior to establishing, Noor held regional and global positions with various established financial institutions based in Singapore. These included positions of Director and Head, Business Development in Southeast Asia, the Citigroup Private Bank, Director, Business Development in Southeast Asia, GE Capital, and Deputy Managing Director, Rabobank Asia. Noor is a frequent speaker at major international conferences on global wealth management, family office advisory, and human capital and leadership topics. She is currently a board member and trustee of the Ireland Fund Singapore, board member, ICA Cares, Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants, and immediate past president and co-founder of the Breast Cancer Foundation. She is also previously a member of the Women's Health Advisory Council. Noor was also joint deputy co-chairperson of Board Agenda in Singapore, an organisation encouraging women to take on board positions as part of diversity. Noor is also a member of the disciplinary and inquiry committees of the Singapore Dental Council and a member of the inquiry committee of the Law Society Singapore. Based in Singapore, Noor is married with 3 grown children and 7 grandchildren. She is also an avid musician and often performs to raise funds for various regional charities. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Noor. Welcome, Noor.
Thank you very much, Taylor, and thank you everybody for being here. I don't know wherever you are, we're blessed to be in Singapore because it's a nice sunny morning. And I deliberately asked Taylor to put that last line in because I think often we work so hard, we forget that we have to take time off for ourselves. And what I found in music, playing with an entire group of men, was the the feeling of being part of a team, which is so good. And although they, chided at us for being women, they actually like it that you have women and men in a band, because that really makes up a team. But back to the subject of women in leadership. Are women's voices getting louder? Are women finally being recognized as a significant equal rather than a far second? While much has been said, has much been done? I think that's what we need to ask ourselves going forward. And if you look at the numbers in terms of women on boards and women in senior positions, you find that they have risen, but not across the board. And in some countries, even like Singapore, for example, we could do better. So what is the reason? Are people still not convinced that the 1 + 1 will equal 11? And that do they recognize that the intrinsic value add women bring to companies, particularly now in the new digi and tech age? And we have quite a few women participating in this. We hope they will talk about this. Would it make a difference? Staying at home, working from home, and working in the office, would that make a difference? We must ask ourselves. That's very important. But at the same time, we must not compromise on standards. There is an immediate need to ensure that in all positions that are being drawn up, that meritocracy prevails. So today we are delighted to have a wonderful cross-section of women and some men. I don't see so far any on the screen, but I have spoken with some who are speaking, who will be sharing their views. And actually they should be applauded for being here. It is important to have them share their thoughts. I also ask that please, speakers, share your personal experiences. What motivated you to actually be what you are today? How did you get through the challenges? Share it with us. And how are you using your present position with a voice louder than before to encourage others, both men and women, to open their minds? And what better way than, the pandemic has its issues, but it also has its good points. And the other big issue, of course, is the world of tech. I keep stressing that because that's going to change things much. So let's not dwell on the past. Let's move on. But this time with much more determination, sense of purpose, and showcase the performance with positive results. And by that, I mean, let's make sure that we actually have measurables. And let's not be shy when we look at the measurables to say what's not working and why, and be flexible enough to switch or move. And that comes back to the question of leadership. And that is so critical when you think that the tone of the organization comes from the top and it has to filter down. So I suggest, everybody is a leader in their own right. Please show us how you use your intrinsic leadership skills to open this whole subject to wherever you are and whoever you are. And let's not forget that the subject of leadership of women have always been leaders at home, yeah? But let's not forget that the home is a very, very important area where we have to make it known. Our children are watching, and they will be people who will translate what they see and what they hear going forward. So the key to all of this going forward is, of course, therefore, leadership. Today, given the time constraints we have and continuing through to tomorrow, we will cover the key leadership matters impacting the topic of leadership, starting today with empowering change and taking action, or why are we are we our worst enemies? Let's be honest. Let's be frank. Do we ask for what we want? And how do we grow our leadership skills and our capabilities, and how can we share that? And then we look at the next generation leadership, supporting and developing the leadership talent, the diversity and inclusion showcase, unlocking great productivity in the workplace and outside. And last but certainly not least, mental health and well-being. It's a subject rarely spoken about loudly, but one which particularly during this pandemic is engulfing both the young and the old. I'm not part of the Advantage group, but they have been Advantage group, but they have been chairing these sessions for several years. But I have been chairing these sessions for several years, and I want to thank the team of Elizabeth, and this year Taylor and Naomi, for cleverly reaching out to so many professionals in diverse industries this time around, as they did before, and especially some names of enterprising young ladies, which you will have the benefit of listening to and sharing ideas, who dare to be different. That's what it is. And it is refreshing to see, therefore, that they dare to take the awesome task of reaching out and to share it at this conference. So I say thank you to that. The show must go on, pandemic or otherwise. Let's all also not forget, in all this talk about how we handle the pandemic going forward, that there is business to be done. And that business can be largely generated too by the force of women. As I was moderating another conference some weeks back, and I would like to quote the wise statement of Mr. Sopnendu Mohenti, the Chief FinTech Officer of the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, who was a member of my panel. And he reminded us that let's be opportunistic and capture that business. You know, getting business from women, business generated by women, is not a charity. It's an opportunity. So let's remember that. And once we do that proactively, the profits come. So over the next 2 days, through speeches by leaders and change makers and breakout groups, we hope this conference will be able to enable us to learn and to share, and most important, develop new contacts so that together we can bring women's leadership in Asia to a new level for the betterment of society. There will be Q&A questions. We will have to moderate that in the interest of time, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to reach out after that. So we will start this conference today with a presentation by the leadership keynote speaker, Fu Xiuting, who is the Global Vice President and Marketing Strategy and Planning print category of HP International, a company that everybody knows about, to address the issue of shaping the change from the top. She's an established marketing leader with more than 2 decades of marketing experience in international consumer goods companies, including Unilever, Mars, Diageo, and Fonterra. Xiuting is focused on building HP today as a global brand with a local soul, driving that brand and its relevance. And it's therefore with pleasure that I would like to welcome our leadership keynote speaker. Before we get on to Xiuting, I just want to say that you combine, Xiuting, technical and digital skills which you have developed with your team by innovating and making people more passionate to embrace the culture of reinvention. That is most challenging and most commendable. Most recently, she was listed on Campaign Asia's Power and Influential list and the 2020 of CMOs. She was previously also named the top 50 Asia's women leaders by the 7th CMO Congress in 2016. Xiuting, you have been recognized as a New York Ad Age China Woman to Watch in 2014, and a Marketing Innovator of the Year, and this was by CNBC China in 2012. It goes back, it's already nearly 10 years, and you are still there driving this. So it is with pleasure, therefore, that I would like to welcome our leadership keynote speaker, the first one today, Fu Siu Ting.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, okay, great. Just checking. I have a little bit of a network problem this morning, which often than not doesn't happen to me. But as they say, Murphy laws happen quite a fair bit. So thanks, Noor, for the great introduction. I'm humbled by what she actually described. I would say that I'm still learning, and I'm constantly on a daily basis learning, in essence. When Naomi actually approached, and Talia approached me to talk about this topic, the way I approach this is that instead of coming from an angle of really corporate perspective, I wanted to really start from telling my own personal story, my own authentic story on how I actually built my own leadership style, how I actually demonstrate change and actually drive the change as a female leader myself. And then how that leads to, what does it mean for HP company in terms of some of the corporate strategies that we are actually applying now. So this is the tone of voice of how I actually start with this conversation. Everything is okay in terms of the voice? Okay, great, thank you. Just really wanted to start with, a couple of tips which I have picked up in my, 20 over years as a female leader and also as a CMO itself. I think, first of all, it's really important that you actually develop your own voice and your own purpose. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I've been very fortunate to be encountered and taught by leaders and trainings to develop purpose and how I actually apply purpose into my daily work. But let me start with telling you a little bit of story of who I am. So you can see on the left hand side, that's a picture of me and my mother, which has a huge resemblance to the right hand side, my mother on the right hand side and itself. So you might be wondering, every time I flash out this picture, everybody thought that picture is actually me. No, actually it's my mom when she's in her 30s. So there's a huge resemblance on that. And the reason why I flashed this out is that I'm born in a family of 3 girls, very strong women that my mother has inspired us. My mother was a retired nurse and she's passed away 5 years ago. But she has been a real source of inspiration for the household and for me personally. Being an Singaporean Chinese with Asian values, she taught me a lot about the female traits in Asian values, things like humility, grace, integrity, hard work. But at the same time, she's also taught me, strong driven traits. For example, things like achievement oriented, being competitive, bring the best of yourself every day to work or to life, and also keep learning. And
now, we might just turn off your camera to help with your network issues.
Is this better? Can you guys hear me? Is this better?
That is better. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll try to vivacious, show my expression to my tone of voice, but that happens in terms of the virtual world. But let me go back to this whole concept of purpose. In my 3rd job, which is with Diageo, the world's leading beverage company, I've spent a good 10 years there. I was very fortunate to be selected as the top 200 senior leadership teams. They, decided to give each one of us an executive coach. And I was sent on a journey of discovering what my purpose is all about, in essence. And I haven't stopped turning back, in essence. As you guys know, Simon Sinek, he is the author of Purpose of Power of Why. And purpose is all really about what gets you up to work every day, what motivates you as an individual, what are the values and the belief behind this. So this concept of purpose is not only applied to leadership training with Diageo, it was also the foundation of how we build brands in Diageo. So each iconic brand that we have a strong reason to believe and strong purpose, and guides us how in terms of the how brand comes alive. And I will bring out an example of how I apply that later on. Now, in bringing that into a recent concept that I discovered, which is a Japanese word for ikigai. And for those who knows Japanese, ikigai basically translate to purpose, or in Japanese, reason for being.
I will call this guy. Wow, his PR is approved.
And it is also the same concept of purpose. And what that really talks about, is if you are at a flow when you are able to apply what you're really good at and what you love into the job that you do, and also the impact that you create in essence. And there's a book currently which is written by Francesc Miró and Hector Guerrero, which actually talks about the concept of purpose or concept of ikigai. And I'll bring that back to you in terms of a real example at the end of the session on how I apply that. But let me move on to the second tip, which is really about, how do you dare to be your own voice and actually have the strength to really radiate that. And with starting this point, I want to actually share two myths that has actually happened to me personally, and how I've busted the myth in essence. I used to think very, very long ago that as long as you work hard to overachieve your targets, you can be rewarded. That might work when you're an individual contributor and your early stage of your career. But I was very soon realized that actually that doesn't quite work. You have to radiate your own voice. You have to go around positioning who you are, what you're really, really good at, to frame yourself in terms of the future role that you actually developed. When I start shifting my gear to really radiate my own voice, I start realizing the progress that I made as a leader actually tremendously increased. The second myth, which I really like this myth, and having worked in the last 15 years in pretty male-dominated industry, is that I used to think you must be tough and not be vulnerable at work. You must wear your pants to work, and you must behave like a man. Showing your emotions is not great at work. And interestingly, I had two mentors, and they're both Mia. And that she said to me that it's okay. You need to be authentic. It's okay to be vulnerable at work. In fact, vulnerability actually shows that you have strength and you have courage and you're confident of yourself. And it brings out the best of you. I start then applying this notion of vulnerability, not really for the sake of vulnerability, but more really about bringing empathy into work. And when I start doing that, it shows up in terms of the speed of building trust with my teams. It shows up in terms of opening conversations. People start trusting and respecting you as an individual. And I see this characteristics work really, really well in the last 14 years as we go through the new normal or the pandemic and tied in with that, because at the end of the day, people want to follow leaders that have a heart. Now, talking about the third tips, developing allies, mentors, and sponsors, whether it's male and female. And I want to share my own story. Coincidentally, in all my careers at every stage, I happen to have mentors and sponsors that champion my own cause. And interestingly, all the mentors that champion my own cause happen to be males. And it wasn't intentional. It was actually by chance. Having mentors and allies that sponsor yourself and champion your cause become a very important thing that I actually lead and drive my own leadership, and also coaches my team to really move forward. Now back to the concept of living my own purpose. And I want to really share my own personal journey with two examples, especially in the last 3 years with HP. I talk a fair bit about how do I bring purpose to life on connecting, on building teams. and also about how do I actually bring that alive through a brand campaign that was executed. This was the team that I inherited and built 3 years ago when I joined HP Inc. as the Asia Pacific CMO. I was given a brief to say, hey, earn the business seat on the table and establish the role of marketing, but also given a brief to say, how can you build capabilities and bind this team? As you can see, it's a hugely diverse team. My purpose, I've mentioned earlier on, which I haven't really shared, is really all about unleashing the inner potential of individuals to bring out the best so as to contribute to brands, people, and society. It connects really, really well with HP purpose, and HP purpose is really about harnessing the potential through our technology so as to keep reinventing through our technology. The tagline of HP is keep reinventing in essence. So I brought this purpose to life by connecting my own individual purpose to HP brand purpose, and to really drive this team towards a reputation of, agility, innovation, keep learning, and keep being their best through trainings, through the campaigns that they developed. And I want to share an example that was pretty close to my heart, which is a female campaign that was launched in 2018 in Japan. As you guys know, in Japan, in 2018, there was work from restyle that was really happening. The government started to realize that because of aging society, they need to encourage female to come back to work. But having said that, the statistics were still appalling during that time, and even till now, 13% of females are in managerial positions. In essence, I was given a brief to say, hey, why don't you develop this campaign that is really just at targeting females versus males? Most of our products are targeted at males. Subconsciously, we weren't really talking to females. So my team went and did a little bit more work through consumer research. And as we start talking to the Japanese, we found this stereotype. So in Japanese, there's this term called Yamato na de shiko, which basically is a direct translation of a Japanese fruit, pink flower, which basically says that the stereotype that's entrenched on Japanese female is that you have to be modest and obedient and not really speak up. And this was a stereotype, and it came out really strong in all the consumer research and the consumer focus group we did. So I went on a journey and me and my team went on a journey and say, let's try to help these females to actually, challenge this convention, challenge this stereotype with our campaigns, and with, how HP and its technology can really, really help them by actually getting them to speak up and follow their own true voice. So we came up with very, really simple ideas, which is to personify and the different stage of life of the Japanese females that were going through, on how females that were actually going against this convention through films, through PR, through 360 campaign. And I just want to show you two simple films that demonstrated that. The first one being one which we actually had a female celebrity that brings out her own personal voice in a stage of a context of study. Now let me play the film.
心配してくれたみんなへ留学を決めたとき説得力がだからで大丈夫って言われたけどでもねチャレンジに年齢は関係ない自分の気持ちに正直でいたいステレオタイプ置いていけHP Spectrum X360.
So this is the first film that we kick off, and obviously there's a whole realm of PR that goes behind it. The second one, let me share this.
お母さん、いい加減落ち着きなさいよってよく言うけど、ごめんね。私にはやりたいことがあります。いい大人なのにね。子供のように夢中です。もちろん先のことはわからないけど、 今は夢と一緒に歩いていたい。ステレオタイプを超えていけ。インテル Core i7 プロセッサー搭載 HP スペクトル。
So this became a platform that is a 2 years platform that we invested in Japan, and ignited a movement both internally and externally. The films doesn't do justice behind this, because behind that there is huge conversations around how this encouraged the females to really challenge this convention and bring in conversations, etc. To really challenge this stereotype in essence, with also actually being able to promote internal diversity in Japan as an organization. Now, bring that all together and applying this to corporate strategies within HP, I've been very fortunate to work for a company which started from its founder, Bill Hallett and Dave Packard, who really believe in diversity and inclusion, and in terms of its DNA and in terms of its purpose. And 3 key metrics or 3 key strategies that HP has been utilizing, and I personally has been part of some of them, in terms of really driving diversity and female leadership. I think, first of all, setting internal and external KPIs is really important. And it can show through some of the statistics that HP has. Globally, we have 31.7% of leadership in terms of director and VP roles that are female. And also the statistics has been increasing. So for vice presidents globally, currently there are females is 29.6, which is up from 18.3 in 2015. And for directorship, we have 32.3 versus 22.7 in terms of some of the KPIs. So measuring and actually studying statistics is really important in order to promote female leadership. I think the second point, which I think is actually more interesting and more helpful, is the type of program that create an environment for collaboration in D&I. HP has a female leadership program called Catalyst at HP globally, which brings in high potential female, give them a course to really help them and support them in terms of their pursuit of female leadership, but bringing it closer to Asia Pac. In the last 1 year, we have set up this WIL program, which is a Women in Leadership Lab. So the high potential females in Asia Pac get to go through a very organized and structured 7 months program to help them with skill set to promote them. But on top of that, there is a voluntary group in every part of the world led by females leaders themselves or volunteers, which are what we call the WIN, Women Impact Network, that actually creates an environment for females to come together, to share new ideas, to network. And I find that really, really helpful and really, really personal in terms of promoting female leadership and female diversity. Last but not least, having the kind of female pipeline recruitment strategy becomes really important. We have specific programs that's called HP Spark in Asia, that is really all about having recruiting fresh graduate and have a 15-month program to really help them in terms of assimilating and picking up skills, and also picking up skills in terms of female leadership. So I talk a lot about my own story and hope that my own story helps you in terms of shaping change. I have been pretty fortunate in my life to be mentored by a lot of male allies in essence, but I picked up an article which is a 2019 Harvard Business Review article. It talks about what are the traits that really are demonstrating the great leaders that this future should have. And they said there's 19 traits in that article. And actually interesting, from that survey, 17 out of the 19 traits actually female possess that. So I think, hopefully my own personal story inspire you to challenge convention, and also help to bring out the inner strength in all of us to dare to break the ceiling. And that's the end of my speech, and hopefully that's helpful for every one of you. Thank you.
That is extremely, extremely awesome, Siu Ting. I can relate, and I think many of us can relate to what you said. Most interesting I found, I know you had Amanda Gorman's picture in there, and she's one of my favorite poets, but I think this really stands out, and we must remember this going forward. Being good is good, but you must let your voice be heard, and you must showcase your own true voice. The other thing, of course, very quickly, is that you can wear a skirt and still be strong. It's okay to be vulnerable, because vulnerability is a sign of strength and it shows you're humane. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing. And I was wondering, do we have time for questions? Yeah?
Yes. Does anyone have any questions for Siu Ting? If you're brave enough, unmute and don't put it in the chat, but say it.
Hi, Siu Ting. Thank you so much for sharing. I really love your story. You mentioned that you were given mentors along the way, right, in the different companies. So, what would your advice be for females who lack mentors or sponsors? How do they go about, looking for mentors, and where could they look for mentors?
I will actually stop my video because I'm really concerned about my network. So pardon me for that. I think I wasn't given mentors, actually. Interestingly, I happened to chance by all these mentors that some of them are either my bosses, but I actually cling on to them to become my mentors, because I realized that I could able at that different juncture of that journey could actually learn certain things about them. So it was by chance, and also then it became my own journey of always looking for mentors that I hope that could help me propel my career, or that's something that I can really learn from them in essence. So it has become something that is a very deliberate and intentional journey. And I can have multiple mentors in terms of different stage of my life, in essence. But I was very clear on looking for mentors that share my same values. But also at the same time, I'm hoping to be able to learn certain things from them. So it's just about being thick-skinned and having the courage to really do that.
So just a follow-up question.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. So did you deliberately look for male mentors? Just out of curiosity.
No, I did not. It was by coincidence. And it happened that a couple of them were all my bosses and sponsors, and it was real intentional. But I found that, especially in the female leadership situation now, when there are male allies that speak more about promoting female leadership and female mentorship, it becomes more powerful. And that definitely is the strategy that HP promotes within the company. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perhaps on that point, I could just add that we women consciously should really try and be mentors. The men don't even have to try. They see something good, they say, wow, this woman can do it, let's push her on. How many of us, thinking back, actually do that? So thank you very much for alerting us, because you are who you are, Siu Ting. That's why you would get the men reaching out to you, because they can see your inner strength as well in mobilizing teams and the value add that a woman can bring to what they want to do in a man's world.
And Noah, I'd like to add to that, absolutely. I think we females may not often become mentors. So, I mean, now in the last few months, I've been very, very deliberate on actually giving time to my teams and even coaching people that's not within my teams. And I found that journey of giving back and sharing actually is very fulfilling, because I can be mentored by a Gen Z who is like 20 years younger than me. I learned things from this person. So the journey of being a mentor myself actually allowed me to not only being fulfilled, but actually I learned things from them. I mean, they are Gen Z, they know a lot of things. They're more tech savvy like us. So it makes me become a richer and a better person.
Thank you very much. I think those are nuggets for us to take away. Siu Ting, you've just kicked off the session beautifully, and we want to thank you and wish you all the best going forward. We're delighted now to follow up on still the subject of empowering change and taking action, to invite the next keynote person. This is talking about human intelligence, how to adapt to change in turbulent times to create a future trajectory. And here again, I want to stress that we are actually want to encourage this whole session to be sharing of your personal ideas and how you then relate it to your organization. So with that, and I will be moderating this session. So I can see Cicely smiling. We have Cicely Ng, who is the Area Vice President and General Manager of Salesforce Singapore. Cicely leads the Singapore business at Salesforce as Area Vice President and General Manager of Singapore, and is focused on enabling Singapore businesses in Asia to innovate, be more agile, and connect with their customers. So, of course, in this capacity, you showcase yourself as a trusted advisor to the C-suites of Asia's large enterprises. So prior to Salesforce, Cicely, you had 15 years working with the likes of, working with IBM, Microsoft, and Sun Microsystems. I'm sure that you gave as much as they gave you back. And you are an equality champion and an executive sponsor for Salesforce's Women's Network in Singapore. You were born in Hong Kong and hold a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the NUS. What is very interesting, and I always try and find out what other hobbies you enjoy: cooking and going on adventures with your husband. That's absolutely fantastic. So, Cicely, as I'll be moderating this session, let's start with asking you, how did you get into this space?
Yeah, so thank you, Noor. And I think that it's such a hard act to follow after what Siu Ting has shared. So thank you, Siu Ting. I love everything that you say. And, you know, I had a few inspiration, and I'll touch on some of the elements that you talk about. So Noor, I think, you know, back to your question, how I got into this space. And so it is true that tech is traditionally more male dominant, but I have always had an interest in science and math. And so my engineering degree, and I've started actually programming when I was 16. So I love it. I think it's a creative process. You code something and you make something out of nothing, right? But I also realized that I would enjoy interacting people, and I don't want to have only interaction with a computer. And so when I graduated from NUS, IBM actually came to recruit the next batch of trainee in those days, and IBM, I think, similar to HP, really invest in people. So it's a very few companies that they don't hire just professionals, so they hire from university and then they train you from scratch, which I love. So I was lucky enough to be in that program, and I started as an individual kind of sales rep in IBM, and that's how I started. And so, you know, from being a trainee in IBM, you know, picking up phone to going out, you know, handling more complex customer, to now leading a big sales team in Salesforce. And that's how I got into the industry. So, but I also want to have a message for, you know, all the ladies in this call, is that tech industry is not, while we need more women, it's not limited to technical roles. So there's a lot of, so like my role is not technical. So, you know, you can be, you know, a variety of things, even business development or marketing, like Siu Ting, or legal or whatever that is in the tech industry, but you don't have to be technical. So, you know, any one of you have an interest, I think I encourage you to look at the tech industry. It's a very exciting, very dynamic, very fast moving places where, you know, we love. But I think Noor, kind of relating back to what Siu Ting said, because it is a male dominant industry. So there's also a lot of kind of thought about, okay, what can we do to have more women in the tech industry? So I think we'll talk about that, but back to you, Noor.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ashley. And you know, a lot of it has got to do with mindset. And obviously, along the way, starting with the tech and going up to all that's related to tech, you face challenges. Share with us one or two situations which you have faced, but which going forward, you not only alert those around you, but you help to ease it, especially, let's say, at the leadership level.
Yeah, so that's a great I think question. So when I was starting out as a young sales rep, a female Asian, I want to please everybody and be respectful and be polite. That's our upbringing. And in order to avoid conflict, especially with, you know, people who are more senior than me, I would not have the courage to speak up, even though there's a situation where is the right thing to do. And I will give you one example. So we actually have a customer, you know, in the region where, you know, we need to fix something. And we needed to invest some services. And the SVP then of this services business basically said, well, we don't have to, and we go into a kind of a big argument. So I wanted very much to fight for, kind of to advocate for my customer, to say that we as a company need to make this right, we need to fix this. But I held back, and then I stayed quiet because I say, he's the SVP, I'm a junior person, so I shouldn't say anything, right? Then later on, I circled this back to a, you know, another executive who is not, you know, he's like an exec sponsor, so he's outside of kind of my direct line. And I told him the situation, and he said this to me. He said, Cecily, when you work, you're not there to win a popular vote. You need to, I mean, you need to be polite and you need to be respectful. But as long as it is the right thing to do for the customer and it's the right thing to do for the company, you shouldn't be afraid of people that are more senior than you, because the fact that they're more senior than you, they should know this better than you. And if they are standing in your way, you should just call it out. So from then onwards, I started to ask myself two questions. When I come to, is it the right thing to do for the company? Is it the right thing to do for the customer? If both answers is yes, then I push forward. And I'll find a way to get it done. And I think a lot of time, I think, you know, Siu Ting talked a bit about that, is that there's a stereotype of Asian that we are, you know, less vocal, and, you know, we like to kind of be respectful of the hierarchy. But I think if you, you need to break that and be, you know, courageous to speak up, even though it's hard to situation, especially to people more senior than you. But I have learned through the years that you can speak your mind, but you can get your message across as long as you are prepared.
Yeah,
to make it easy to understand.
The benefit we women have, at least looking at my own career, right, is you can say something serious with a smile. But relating to what you said, and I'm thinking of what Siu Ting said as well earlier on, working with a company like Salesforce, which is international, which you know, reaches out to the whole world. What is the strategy on gender parity, and how have you, in your senior capacity, and basing on what you said earlier, helped to influence them on D&I, and also help to propagate it? Influencing is one thing, propagating. And how do you know it's working? What are your measurables? Okay,
that's a couple of questions. I'll try to answer it in this way. So first I'll talk about kind of what Salesforce does from CEO down, and then I'll talk about what I try to do in my sphere of influence. And then I will tell you some of the maybe one or two examples of how I know it has worked or not worked, and what we can do more, if that's okay. So again, I think, you know, similar to HP, again, Siu Ting, I kind of resonate a lot, is that CEO sponsorship and CEO's acknowledgement diversity has a direct relation to business outcome is very, very important. And a lot of such decisions needs to be championed from the top. Otherwise, you will have one or two female leader who is really passionate, but it is in a small isolated spot. So in order for a company to make systematic, comprehensive change about equality and diversity, it has to start from the top. So I'm lucky to work for Salesforce, whose CEO Mark Benioff is leading with purpose, and is a very purpose-driven company. And one of the key things and one of the key values that we have is equality, which diversity and inclusion is kind of folded under equality. And there are many things that Salesforce is doing, but first of all is to kind of publish diversity data. And the magic is that once you publish it and once you can look at the progress, you can actually see the needle move. So I think since 2018, so if you go to salesforce.com and I think /equality, you can see the numbers. So in terms of, so there are a couple of things that Salesforce publish and measure. One is the representation. So right now, about 33% of our global workforce are women. And we actually, compared to 5 years ago, we have 11,000 more women working in Salesforce across the different roles. We're making slow progress in the leadership representation, but just like all other industries, women are underrepresented at the leadership level. So when we measure the VP plus roles, we got better. So we increased from 22% to now about 33%, but I think it's still not 50. So we still have ways to go. Then the third thing that I think makes a huge change, and I'm going to talk about, what I do as a manager, is the pay gap. It's the pay gap. And Salesforce does an audit every year, and we've been doing it for a couple of years, is that if it's two roles, similar roles, but unexplained difference, we will fix it in the yearly review. And we continue as we acquire companies, right? So we'll kind of continuously do that. So we've so far spent 12 plus million to do that. And you can only do that for a person who has all the data. So it has to be kind of a management driven thing. So these are some of the things that we are working on as a company now. You have asked me what you can do as as a manager. So as a manager, you hire people. So there are a couple of things that I very strongly and I'm very vocal about is number one, the pool of candidates. So whenever I know of someone hiring, but the final two candidates are both male, I'll ask why. So at least we don't hire women for women to meet the quota, but at least from the pool, I always, tell the manager that even though they don't report into me, I'll question. And I'm like, are you telling me that we can't do better? Are you sure we've exhausted the pool? Because the easy thing is, they want to hire from a group of network that they have and they don't really look hard enough. So that's something I drive, which is a candidate pool. And second thing is I want to do my small part in bridging the pay gap. And why I say that is that I often see women tend to undersell themselves. So they don't negotiate as hard. And a lot of employer will kind of give you an offer based on what you draw in your last role. But then you think about the difference accumulated in 20 years, 30 years. It's a huge gap. So now when I hire, I don't ask them what you are drawing today. I just say, this is the pay for this role, and this is what I'm going to offer to you.
This is absolutely fantastic. It's very, very proactive. But I think the key point you raised, which is what I said in the opening, is firstly, the company leading with a purpose. Equality is critical and is included in the D&I, plus also the leadership, which has got to be proactive. And the points you raised about how you all measure and also about salary parity, not enough of it is being heard. It's such good work. And when I speak with a few companies, they have this issue. But why don't you guys just shout out what you're doing, how you're measuring, how the results show that it is working? This is what it is. So much good work is being done, but it's kept in. And, we hope that there will be a lot of publicity on collectively what people are doing. And, you've touched on many interesting points with you yourself, that last point in particular about salary is so important. Your last drawn salary accumulated. On that note, I'm sure there are some burning questions from those of you who are attending the session. Does anybody have any questions? Because I think Cecily has come out with some very, very unique approaches to addressing this issue.
Cecily, my name is Natalie, and I work for VF Corporation, which is a company selling sports and outdoor brands such as the North Face, Vans, and Timberland. Now, during my experience, I'm based here in Hong Kong, and I've been living in Asia for the last 9 years. And each of your comments really resonates with me. So in terms of how do you find those male allies, but ultimately take the courage to make comments and to challenge the norms. Now, I also feel it's not just the Asian culture to respect hierarchy, and I'm from the UK, and I was always taught to respect my elders. So this also for me is around how do I make sure that I can have that courage and take the leap of faith. But I loved Noor's comment around you can always say something with a smile and take that courage to make a difficult statement or a challenging statement, but with a smile. And I also believe that generally speaking, females are very intuitive and can read the room. So even a situation where we think, oh my goodness, I'm being really cheeky or I'm being very, very challenging, the impact of that is probably taken as being more assertive rather than being challenging. So I do feel that sometimes we overthink it rather than just saying it. So how do we feel and find that courage just to say it rather than overthinking, how am I going to say it? How is that going to land? How is it going to be taken? Because by then we've lost it. We've lost that moment where we can really step up and have a view. So I think each of your comments very much resonates with me. And I'd also think about how do we bring the piece of us that sits at home as a wife and a mother, sometimes more as a wife, where we can bring that piece of us that is more challenging at home and is very dedicated and determined at home. How do we bring that into the workplace? Because no matter what, 99% of us are very, very kind with positive intent. So how do we use that to get our message across in those challenging situations?
No, thank you for your comment, Natalie.
Can I add that, Natalie, just as we bring what we have in the home to the office, we must try not to bring what we see in the office home.
Absolutely.
I'm often reminded by my husband, but it's all a question of balance.
Yes.
And I think all of us will agree, if we look back, that not only have we moved to where we are, I'm 71 now, so I've worked nearly 50 years. Most of the men were mentors, but more importantly, men do like strong women. Think about it, yes. On that note, Cecily, do you have anything to add? Does anybody have anything to add to all of this before we then take
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. Yeah, my name is Thủy, and working also for VF Corporations, and I'm leading the DT department supporting the VF business. So I'm really a woman in tech. and very proud to be. But then I'm really facing the challenge to have very little candidates when I open a positions, and it's really desperate. And I'm just wondering what we as women can do to make sure that we can, encourage female, encourage students, ladies to go to more tech area. Tech is fun. Tech is really fantastic. And I would really like us to think about how we can get more candidates in the tech area, how you can bring more ladies, young ladies to study tech and be interested in it, because tech is the future, really. I strongly believe. So I would like to learn from you who are in Salesforce, in HP. I really love what you are sharing. How can we make that happen?
Yeah.
Just very quickly, we will give a quick answer.
Yeah.
If we may, because we're going to have soon a 15-minute break, and you all can actually interact in between. But Cicely, please.
Yeah, thank you for it's hard to run the time. So Toy, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. That's a great question. And I haven't looked at the statistic, but I had a recent conversation with someone from the government, and she's telling me that, look, we are not short of university students from a racial perspective. It's quite balanced, the gender. But the problem is getting them into the industry and then having them stay and progress. So I think in short, the STEM program is important. I think someone mentioned in a chat group. But more importantly, once you recruit them, that, how do we help women in all stages in the career, not just when they are about to come up to be a leadership, but all throughout the stages of career, how do we help them? And I think role model is a big one. So if they see someone who can be like them, be authentic, have all the insecurities and imperfections just like them, but they can still do well and balance kind of with a family responsibility. And, and I think that will help a lot to kind of give people or other women the confidence that they can also do it. So all of us can do it, right? So I just, the last thing to add, no, I promise you that we can go to the break, is that we have two arms. So one arm, we pull ourselves up, and then the other arm, we pull someone else up.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. And really the key word here is 3. 1, do it. Then, you have continuous learning and education, and you must empower yourself. Everything can be provided for you, but if you don't empower yourself, nothing happens. So on that note, I want to thank you all for being present at this so far, these sessions. It's been most insightful. Have a good break, and we'll see you at 10:15. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noor, hi, it's Vibha. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Hi, Viva. You look absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, thank you very much. Ditto. I was listening very keenly to the previous speaker, so it was a lot of fun. I'm going to try and share my screen to see whether this actually works, because we were having a bit of technical problems, and I think your team has been fabulous in helping us out.
No, I'm not for the vintage. I'm only the chairperson.
Organizer sharing my slides.
Hi, Viva. Hi,
Hi.
it's Naomi from Advantage.
Hi there.
So we'll share your slides. That way you don't have any technical issues or anything. So just let us know when you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, and so there's a video there, as you know, on slide 4. Yes. And then I need to cut it off at 1:25 or something, because I think the message just keeps going on the same message.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I'll cut it off 1:25, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Viva.
Viva, can you hear me?
Very clearly.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say it's all the Advantage people. I'm not part of that group.
Oh, okay.
I'm just someone they picked from. So I've been doing their chairing their sessions now in fact, I did one for Malaysia as well. It was very good. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I do know that the team was quite keen that we connected, and we didn't get a chance. I didn't even know. They just said to me today, you know, the chairman asked whether we would connect. I said, why don't you tell me? Because I would have loved to have called.
Right. Yeah. Because I thought it would be. Let me see this. Yeah, so, I was, are we about, I told them to tell me when to start, yeah.
You can go ahead and start, Noor.
All right. Yeah, very good morning again to everyone who's joined us. May I just remind you to put on your videos so at least, we can see numbers out there, because at the moment, many are still on video off, and we hope, you are catching this session. We can go ahead now.
Yes, Noor.
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, once again, thank you, and let's continue with this very interesting session today. And we're delighted to have a very dynamic woman yet again, and this time to talk about maximizing the leadership capability of women in the organization. And she is in an absolutely right position to tell you that. Leaving one's comfort zone, tailored training towards addressing the challenges women face in the workplace, educational training. These were all topics we touched about briefly. And to tell us a bit more is Vibha Coben, Chief Executive Officer for Malaysia Manulife. Vibha was appointed as Group Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Manulife Holdings Berhad, and Chief Executive Officer, Executive Director of Manulife Insurance Berhad on the 1st of October last year. She also sits on the board of Manulife Investment Management Berhad. She was formerly the Chief Distribution Officer at Manulife Asia, responsible for developing and executing the strategy for Manulife's distribution across Asia, including championing the adoption of digital channels. Now, we talked about the challenges in the digital world for women, and let's hear also from Vibha on how she's handling and leading that situation. So under her leadership, Manulife's agency sales force grew significantly and became the world's third best in terms of $1 million roundtable membership. She's also helped to vastly strengthen Manulife's bancassurance capabilities, delivering strong growth to its regional partnership with DBS Bank in Singapore, and renewing or establishing new partnerships in Vietnam, Indonesia, and Myanmar, with organizations like Danamon, TechCom, and in Myanmar with UAB. She's championed the adoption of digital channels and tools throughout distribution. So prior to joining Manulife, Vibha had senior roles over 30 years, certainly well kept, I must say, in banking, insurance, and management consulting across Asia, Europe, and Australia. And in today's world, I think you all will agree that having international experience certainly helps. These included roles in e-business sales, customer acquisition, finance, wealth management, liabilities, mortgages, and credit cards. So Vibha holds a Master of Business Administration from the University of Western Australia, a postgraduate diploma from the Securities Institute of Australia, CFA equivalent actually, and a Bachelor of Commerce from Delhi University. Vibha, all yours.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, I did start when I was 13. I just have to say that. So thank you very much for having me on this forum. I'm very excited to be here. And when I saw the topic of discussion, maximizing leadership capability, I thought I would go, and on the next slide, if you can look at it, I thought I might actually talk about and reiterate. I know I'm speaking to the converted here, but why invest in women leaders? Why do we need to talk about that? What should we invest in? And I wanted to talk about a couple of things which are very close to my heart, and you know, which I've sort of learned along my career and still learning, to be fair, which is widening your comfort zone and finding and using her voice. Now, when I say finding, I mean, all of us have a voice, so let's be very clear. We're not looking for it. It's a question of how to use it more often. And I think the previous speaker was talking a little bit about that also. So I think you'll find some thematic sort of conversation through this conference, I'm sure, Noor. So if I go to the next slide. So now let's look at the next slide. And okay, so does gender bias exist? So here's the woman who's knocked out, I reckon it's a mammoth, and her partner's busy going, hey, I'm the hunter, you're supposed to be the gatherer. And all she's saying is he was standing on the stuff I wanted to gather. So this is sort of symptomatic. In 2021, we are still talking about gender bias and, you know, is there equality? And as with the pandemic over the last maybe, you know, 18 months, there's a lot of studies done into a year, perhaps, a lot of studies being done where women are actually finding that they are bearing the larger brunt. I mean, we've always talked about mental load, but larger brunt of actually managing the household as well as the careers. And for those of us who have young children at home, who are, you know, who are Zoom classes or online classes, you can actually see that it has actually exacerbated. I do know amongst my team itself, a lot of my women, I know I don't bother them at certain times, but I do know I get my emails all between 7 and 10 o'clock at night because that's their second shift. Now, that's not sustainable. And I do gently tell the male leaders in my exco that, you know, maybe they should step in sometimes, and if they don't, and that it's a great idea because they get to connect. But the fact of the matter is women with children are 3 times most likely, rather than the fathers, to be, you know, responsible for majority of at least managing this, even if they're not physically doing this. And apparently, and I was doing some research on this because I was looking to see what impact, and have people actually seen this, or am I just looking at this in my team? And apparently there's 1 in 4 women, at least this is very North American, but I don't see it's in any different to Asia. We've just not done the study. Are thinking of leaving or downsizing their career because of COVID. So we already have a limited number of women leaders, and this is going to increase pressure on getting that disproportionately numbers, you know, staying there or increasing it. So that's the point I wanted to make here. But when we go to the next slide, and I wanted to play this video, and my question is, whose role is it to promote gender equity? And so we just played this.
Gents, you can take it, escalator right to the top. Thank you very much. Ladies, take the stairs, please. Stairs, gents, take the escalator. Ladies, take the stairs, please. Gents, take the escalator. Ladies, take the stairs, please, if you don't mind. Over here. Go up the escalator. Ladies, take the stairs, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Gents, go up the escalator if you want. Shut the escalator. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies, can you take the stairs, please? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's just the way it is. Yep, it is. Stairs, please. Thank you very much. Yep, it's just the way it is. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Can you take the escalator, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
In 2018, the path to leadership is still too slow. We need more women leaders in London to make our city even more successful.
So you get the message. This goes on for a while. So you know what we're talking about. What was interesting in that? In the previous slide, please. What was interesting and apparent in the videos, no one challenged the concept. You can see people were worried, they were concerned. There were women helping each other, you know, carry prams up the stairs, but everyone was busy. They had to get to their particular, you know, I'm sure, you know, we're all on this path. I have to get there in by 9, by 8:30, I have to start my appointment. But everyone stuck with the rules, implicit. There was no rules, but it was like an implicit sort of, you know, way of getting to the top. So no one could be bothered to ask this. So the question for me was, you know, it's not just what we have to do for ourselves, but what I think allyship means for all of us. So that's my first point. The second point was, do we need an economic reason? And you know, there have been studies, and Lenin and actually McKinsey did the study where they talked about the economic case, right? You know, when you look at top quartile companies in a particular peer group, the more diverse they are in terms of being in the top quartile, they're 25% more likely to be above average profitability. So if we all like numbers, you know, that's a great number to talk about. Actually, it goes up to about 36% if you look at gender, ethnic diversity. However, my puzzlement is this: 50%. I mean, we talk about having talent to execute to our strategy, creating and executing to our strategy. If we ignore 50% of the talent out there, how can we actually say we have the best teams? So that's the first thing. The second part is, it's just the right thing to do. You can't actually say, you know, there's a group of people and we're just going to exclude them because, I don't know, we just exclude them. So there is a key reason why we do invest in our leaders, and why it is important for going through and investing in our leaders. So why do women leaders, why do we find that there's fewer of them? And what is the path to it? And every time someone says to me, I had an IWD panel recently, and a male leader was frustrated. He said, women don't speak up. We need to train them to do that. And my question was, haven't you asked why they don't speak up? Why do we keep saying they don't speak up and we have to train them? I mean, do we not speak up at home, or do we not speak up, you know, with our kids or with our spouses? So why, or our parents? So why is it, why don't they speak up? So here's a few sort of, you know, when I asked this question, a few answers which came up. The first one was, nobody backed me. So this whole question, the first dot one, please, if someone can just say next. So you'll find that no one backed me, which means this is the mentorship versus sponsorship. Naomi, you need to click next. So the first bullet point comes up. Okay, I'll just continue anyway. So the question was mentorship versus sponsorship. So when I was in a banking career, I remember very clearly having a female sponsor. And when the next role came up, she was the person who advocated for me. It was not like I put my hand up and said, I'd like to do that. And I could have done the job, obviously. but she was the person who advocated for me. So having sponsorship, and I know you'll talk about this later. The second point there is I didn't ask for the job. So the question was, if I put my head down and bum up and I'm really good, someone will notice it and they'll offer me this role. The third point is handling stress differently. So I think the previous speaker, I think Cecily actually said something about, someone was saying we overthink things, and this whole idea of having a very robust conversation. I've done this all weekend. I've sort of brooded on it, and I've come back, and my male colleagues are all like, high-fiving, and we're all going out for a beer, and I'm thinking, geez, it didn't affect them at all, did it? But it's not, it didn't affect them. It's just the way we handle stress. It's very different. The third one is this question on, am I good enough? And I think anyone who's read Michelle Obama's book would hear this right in the beginning, this whole comment of, am I good enough? So this self-doubt, this naughty little voice in your head, this terrible voice in your head, which keeps telling you, oh, maybe you're not perfect there, and you haven't quite done this, and you haven't done that. And my big thing about this, and it still goes on in my head, is to say, off with you, banish you, not listening to you, and recognizing that it comes up all the time, and saying, no, forget this, am I good enough? I mean, then you find somebody else get the job and say, I'm better than them. So no, stop talking about, am I good enough? The second, the next point is about, and I'll know when it comes up, is it narrow comfort zone? Yes, it's narrow comfort zone. So I talk about narrow comfort zone. I don't talk about getting out of your comfort zone. It's widening your comfort zone. I'll come to that in a minute because I've got a specific item on that. Balancing between family and career, and doesn't necessarily mean you have to have children. Family can be, caring for siblings, parents, having your own life, but balancing that. And this whole idea about work-life balance, and I think about it a lot. And at least for me, sometimes life has taken over, and sometimes work takes over. The question is, do we allow those things to happen? And does our organization, the one we work for, allow those things to happen? And the last part is, of course, support. I mean, without doubt, if we don't actually get the support, right support from people in our life, our organization, our corporations, that's never going to work out. So I know we said this, we are sort of our own worst enemy, but sometimes I feel we need to recognize we have superpowers and actually work out what those superpowers are and think about them more often than anything else. So the next one, I know we talk about training, and I'm not qualified to talk about training, but these are the kind of things which have helped me and which we in Manulife also help our women with. So the first thing on the next slide is we talk about, it's across multiple dimensions. So the first point there is recruitment, talent, and performance management. So for recruitment, making sure we have diverse candidates slates. We have a gender pay equality came up before. So making sure that that is something which is ingrained on all of us. Why do I say this is training? It's because leaders are actually recruiting. So they are the people who need to do this, not HR. They're the people who need to be sort of, with that mindset. And when I talked about advocacy, so when I talked about advocacy before, I remember when this particular female leader put me up for this role, she was asked why her, and her response was why not, and didn't get an answer back. So there we go. So it's actually making sure people have that mindset change of leaders. Leadership courses, I love women's leadership courses, and I've always been conflicted as to whether we should make it just for women or we should include the men in there also. And I think there's argument for both. I think the idea of leadership courses for women, it's a very safe environment. I've seen great energy. I've seen people going through, aha, so it's not only me who goes through this. Aha, so you think the same. So this whole idea of camaraderie and this feeling of good. I mean, at least we are all here together and we recognize we're really good people. We've got these superpowers. But talking more about executive presence, about storytelling, about confidence building in a safe environment is marvelous. At the same time, I think having our male leaders in here is awesome because they actually get to drive a lot of these decisions and advocacy of women too. Using your voice, I'll come to that later. Understanding and support. So it's very interesting. So when I came back as a new mother, I've got 3 children. When I came back, and each time, interestingly, even though I knew it was going to happen to me, I could not avoid it. Each time, I almost had a loss of confidence coming back to the workplace. Whether it was 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, didn't matter how long my mat leave was. It was almost a question of, oh my God, I've been out here. Is my brain fried? Will people look at me differently? Will I look at things differently? And no, and it takes time. And the second part is there is this separation anxiety. You're leaving your little baby and coming back. And I've found that when people have actually recognized this, and there are companies who do this, they actually run coaching sessions for leaders and parents before, during, and after parental leave. And it's both for men and women. And just understanding that and having someone at work actually recognize that and saying that just because you feel like that doesn't mean you're any less committed, either to work or to doing a fabulous job, is very, very important. And so that understanding and support, and we've got ERGs, employee resource groups, with support in here. So it doesn't always have to be driven. I mean, there are a lot of passionate volunteers in organizations who will be part of this and who are part of this. And the last one is promoting visibility. So you find that, actually having women more in these forums where you get a chance to formally shadow leaders, present to leaders, and so allowing them to set up relationships with leaders actually gives them a lot more confidence and also allows people to think about them when there are opportunities which come up. Now, I was just after having said this, someone wrote to me from our global office yesterday and said, we'd like you to facilitate this for us, our next employee forum. And I was just thinking, why me? And so maybe we have to get out of that also. And that's why I say I'm on this journey still after these years, and keep, recognizing more and more of these signals in myself. Why not me? I mean, it'll be fun. I know it's going to be great. And so allowing us to do that. And I think one of the things we need to recognize here is the rise of women does not mean the fall of men. So in my 3 children, I've got a son too. So it's not just the daughters I'm worried about my son too. So it's a question of collectively actually improving our workplace. So on the next slide, I talk about widening of the comfort zone. So this is about, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? I'm not ready. And when you do get over that hump, some magic happens. Now, we all want our comfort zones, and it's not just a female thing, or everybody. We like that favorite sofa, I like my favorite food, I like my favorite music. So this is not about not having your comfort zone. But the whole idea is, why not? Because you are stronger than you think. You discover opportunities you didn't know you had. In fact, today I was looking up on LinkedIn and I saw a quote from Richard Branson, which says, when opportunity knocks, sometimes you just take it, no questions asked. No questions asked, you just take it. And of course, YOLO, you only live once, do it, have a go. So what stops us from doing this? When I think about my various roles, and I've moved countries a few times, and why do I say widening of comfort zone? My latest move to Malaysia from Hong Kong has been much easier than my move was from Singapore to Hong Kong, or Sydney to Singapore, or my previous move from Singapore to Sydney, or Sydney to Singapore. So because I just get better at it. I just get better. The first time was a disaster. There were all these things I hadn't realized. The next time I was a bit better and a bit better. When I take new roles now, I'm not perfect, but I'm better at actually saying, these are the things which I need to have in place in the first month, in the second month, in the third month. And that took a while to actually get there. So have I had disasters when I've taken risks? Yes, I definitely have. I can think of 2 big disasters, you know, having made 2 role changes. Did I learn from them? Yes. Did I get out of them quickly? Yes. But, you know, when I think about those 2 opportunities, there were great learnings and great you know, lessons which I still use now. So the whole idea is three things I would say to people: take risks, vocalize what you want, you know, be very clear. Previous slide still. So be very clear about where you want to go. Have career conversations. Don't say no to opportunities. Take a chance and say yes, but ask for support. So about 3 or 4 roles ago, I had to do a regional role. My son was in year 12. I was in Sydney, and I didn't want to move. It was out of Singapore. I didn't want to move. So my answer wasn't no because, but rather yes and. Can I do it out of Sydney for a year until you know, Ash finishes year 12? So it's giving people options, asking for support. And you will find when you ask for it, most people go, yeah, it makes sense. Because a lot of them are in the same position and they understand that. So making sure you don't put up your own obstacles and your own objections before. So women do achieve fewer stretch assignments, fewer development opportunities. So how do you make sure your voice is heard? So when we go to the next slide, I remember I was in a consulting firm and I used to do business development. And this was my pitch. So I'd set up a pitch, you know, we were potential clients, very excited. I had my male colleague who was kind of an expert in that area. That's why he was coming along. I knew enough to be dangerous. We'd done a little rehearsal and everything before we had gone in. And I start my pitch. And you know, we do the intros and all this sort of thing. I start my pitch. Now, those of you who follow football or, you know, rugby or whatever, know what a hand pass is, which is basically you take your ball and you pass it seamlessly to your colleague, sorry, your teammate, who runs off with it and scores a goal or a try, whichever game you're looking at. And so that's how we were supposed to work. So here I am, I'm sort of, you know, in full flow, and suddenly it's almost like my next word was picked up by, let's say, Joe, my colleague, and he just took it seamlessly and went and went for the try. And I remember thinking, what happened there? And at that time, and I'll tell you later what was going through my head, but I just, and after he finished, I said, well, before Joe interrupted me, what I was going to say was, and I remember Joe going, oh, and he was quite offended. And so I realized a few things. First one, I don't think Joe really realized he was being offensive, because that was offensive. Second, I had my esteem up, and because I should have never done that in front of a client. Did I feel comfortable? No. Did I feel good? No. Did I brood? Yes. But didn't Joe ever interrupt me again in a pitch? No. So it's so uncomfortable, and it annoys me that I have to say this. And it's not easy. And I still have to say it. I'm on expo sometimes, and I still will say, can I finish my point, please? And so I started, you know, this whole idea of voice. Again, I went and looked at why. Why does this happen? I mean, I don't like looking at symptoms and then fixing women for it, right? So I go, why does this happen? And apparently there's this, you know, when I look at it, there are reasons, apparently, you know, physiological reasons, you know, our voices are higher octave, you know, we're a bit more breathy when we speak. And apparently, you know, that sort of means that we get interrupted more often. Women judges get interrupted 3 times more than male judges. So this is not a power thing. This is not a which level you are thing. It's not like, you know, I'm a junior, can I speak up? I'm a senior, I get to speak. It's not that at all. So that's one thing. The second part is apparently it's the language we use and the way we speak. And so the question is, do we fix women to sound more like men? And I'm not really, I'm the jury's really out. So this whole idea of muscular language. So I read up on this, and I just want to share what that could be. So he said, you know, we're afraid of how women will react to criticism. She said, we don't get feedback even when we ask for it. So women say, women get defensive when they're challenged. And we say, we obsess about a meeting for days after it's over. Now, I've been there, I can tell you that for sure. And they go, women get more emotional than men. And they go, it's not emotion, it's passion. And if I get called emotional once more, I just bit someone's head off because they said that to me. I said, that's how I talk, that's who I am, I cannot be you. Because I was told, you know, when you get annoyed, I can see it on your face. I said, great, because I want the other person to know I'm annoyed. That's okay. I actually want them to know this. So I think being comfortable about who we are. So also women are less confident than men. Well, if you're only 1 or 2 amongst 10 or 15, yes, you know, you do feel you need to, you know, how do I get there? Now, the other part is language. Apparently, we are a bit more, you know, conciliatory, I would say, in my language. So it'll be things like, you know, I think it'd be nice to go to dinner to this place, rather than we should go to dinner at this place. Or maybe we can think of this plan rather than here's my plan. Or how about, so I strongly suggest. Now, I don't know. I mean, you know, some of that might be very good initially, and maybe it can become part of you, but we can't lose our authenticity in who we are. So that's the only thing I would say there. So again, so what you say versus how you say is quite important also. But feeling very confident in my skin, in our superpowers, I keep saying this again and again, and saying that's who I am. That's who I am. I'm still effective. I'm still good at what I do, but that's who I am. So what can our leaders and colleagues do? In one of this, when we were talking at IWD and Manulife globally, one of the questions came out from this young gentleman in our treasury team, and he said, "What can I do more to support this cause?" And we said, "Ask your colleagues. Ask your colleagues what they have to say. If you haven't heard from them, ask for their input. If someone interrupts them, you reach out and say, can Vibha please finish your point?" Make it a safe environment. Make it a safe environment for people to say what they want to say, and complete their thought process and debate healthily, and bring women into discussion. So ask the question. So make your voice heard, but at the same time, I think find your allies. I've got this great leader in a particular meeting who always made sure that people finish their points, male or women, or male or female. And so you could make out that people knew you have to actively listen and you have to let people complete. This is just basic courtesy. Of course, I like the Teams thing where you put your hand up. And so people actually say, oh, Vibha, you've got a comment to make. So this is pretty good. You know, all of us are doing Zoom calls and digital calls, and that makes it much easier. So in summary, and I hope I'm on time, investing in women leaders makes sense on multiple fronts. It's not just economic, it's also a question of, you know, untapped talent. It's the right thing to do. It's not as simple as just training women. It's not a fix women kind of issue. Although that said, it's wonderful to actually invest in them coming together, talking about, you know, how they actually take advantage of opportunities, how you change mindset, and also pulling male leaders into some of these forums, and the need for allyship, I think, from companies and leaders is always there. And one of the things which I was thinking about while I was wondering what to say today is this is not about diversity, but rather about inclusion. And that's what I feel. It's all about inclusion, as I see this more and more, and making people feel, you know, the belonging, the need for belonging. And I'd heard about this quote, and I looked up who said it. Apparently, it's Werner Myers, who's a leading D&I expert. But it did say, and this is the last thought I want to leave you with. I mean, that's a woman with superpowers, by the way, in case you're wondering about the tape. Is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. So with that, I close what I have to say. Thank you, Noor.
Thank you, Vibha. I think everything that you said resonates so much with many of us, and certainly hope that for those of you who've not yet brought out your inner strength to speak up and to empower yourselves, Vibha's said it. And remember, the rise of women is not the fall of men. And I don't think the men think that at all. In fact, they do want us to rise, but they're not hearing our voices. So let's be loud about it. And I love this. Why her? Why not? Thank you again, Vibha, very, very much. Because of time constraints, we don't have the opportunity to raise questions, but you can always reach out, and I'm sure Vibha would be more than happy to address your suggestions. But please, these sessions are about empowering ourselves. Let's do it. We can. On that note, and continuing with the subject of empowerment and inclusion, our next speaker is Rachel Frisberg, who is going to talk a bit more about building resilience, developing growth through adversity. I'm sure that's a natural continuation of all that has been discussed now. Now, Rachel has worked in the pharmaceutical industry. She's area head APAC for Roche Pharma International, and she has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years. And she's held various positions in the UK and globally. Again, the globally does help very much. So you started your career at Glaxo Wellcome in the UK in 1993 and subsequently moved to Ferring Pharmaceuticals and then Sanofi Aventis. And you've had extensive product launch and strategy development experience with specialist hospital and primary care products. So since you joined Roche Pharma in May 2006, you've worked in more than 10 different therapeutic areas. Now that's most interesting. And you've supported Roche's mission to make healthcare more sustainable. I'm familiar with that because I know what they do, and medicines more accessible in the region. I guess today with the pandemic, that means a lot. So you've spent 5 years in Asia working with decision makers to develop strategies to improve healthcare systems. And you've moved into your current role as area head in 2018, where you can enable and support regional healthcare systems to adapt a patient-centric approach. Again, so important in today's world. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you so much, Noor. Thank you for that very humbling introduction. So I've been in the industry, as you said, for over 25 years and spent 5 of those in Asia and 15 of those in Roche. And just really this morning, sort of feel very honored to be able to just share some thoughts, a little bit, and some reflections on thinking about, how do we develop growth and sort of build ourselves and think about, growth during some difficult times that we've been facing at the moment. So the first thing I'm going to attempt to do is to share my screen and share some slides that I have, a couple of slides with you. So let's see if this, hold on a minute. Now, can you see my slides just in presenter view here? Yeah, okay, wonderful. So really just thinking about this,
Sorry, can you swap?
Slideshow, is that better? Yeah, I just realized, otherwise you can see everything that's coming at the same time. So a lot resonated of just, what we've just heard, particularly particularly the quote around diversity and inclusion and having our voices heard. And maybe on that note, can everyone go on mute? Because I can hear some background noise.
They like muscular language and a lot of smiling.
And we We went on
But it
mute.
was very long, I thought. Maybe I was just rambling on, I thought.
Sorry, is it?
I don't know. I mean,
I didn't think it was long.
Yeah. I thought it was like a bit abrupt at the end, and it's not like, oh.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so talking about having voices heard, I think that resonated with me a lot. And I'm going to talk a little bit about empowerment as well, because that's something that I've been striving for in my own leadership over the past years as well. So I think when thinking around, developing growth through adversity and how we build our resilience, it's not a topic we can talk about without actually probably mentioning the pandemic. So hold on a second. So when thinking about, as we have, been moving towards within Roche as an agile organization, and really thinking about how can we embrace adversity through the context of the pandemic and through this virtual working situation. And actually just earlier this morning, I was on a call with someone who'd moved from our UK organization to San Francisco back in August. And through that whole time, as he's moved into the US part of our organization, the whole time, of course, he's only met his colleagues in the virtual setting and from his front room. And so for me, it's thinking around, how we're adapting and evolving the way that we work, but our own personal boundaries as we go into this more virtual way of working as well. And so I think, as we think about that agility and what that really means on this more flexible approach, and something that we've been working on over the last few years, I think that's really put us very much in good stead as we moved into the pandemic situation, because it's really about how could we embrace some of those opportunities whilst really being able to empower colleagues, but at the same time have meaningful connections as well. And I think probably we've found that there's been some things that we could never imagine would happen in a virtual setting, happening in a virtual setting. And as Noor said, it's very much been, as I've been thinking around in this role around how do we shift and evolve patient well-being within Asia. And one of the ways that we thought to be able to do that was to bring together, back in October last year, both internal and external stakeholders to really think about how we could make shifts within healthcare, with focus in particular on two countries, the Philippines and Thailand. And the idea was actually to bring together, to have a virtual table, and around that virtual table to bring diverse voices in, people who had very different perspectives. And many of those people, it was the first time that they could actually connect and meet each other in this virtual setting. And I think what I've been able to see is when you align people around a purpose that is much bigger than ourselves, there is an opportunity for people to lean in and to really think about how do we get to know each other in a different way in that virtual setting, but really linked to a bigger, bolder common purpose. And this is what we're aiming to do with an initiative that we've been working on called Mission Leapfrog, which has been that in mind. And I think for me, that does come back to the point of, in that virtual setting, it does allow for different voices to be heard. And it does allow actually for us to have much more of an inclusive environment potentially than we have in the past. So there's always pros and cons with that. I think the other piece, of course, that I have heard a lot over the last weeks and months is the word fatigue. And fatigue around, people really thinking, how do I cope in this new situation? How do I reestablish the boundaries that have shifted? Because of course, the time when, yes, I'm responsible for about 14 countries within Asia Pacific. The first year of my role, I spent a lot of the time in the aeroplane. And of course, the second year of the role, I spent a lot of time then face to face, but also in global meetings. And myself and Noor were actually trying to connect last night, and I couldn't connect because I was on a call till very, very late last night. And then so how to reestablish those boundaries, knowing that there's different demands on our time and still needing to connect with family. And so here, that's why I focus on the walk the walk. So this is around how do we pay attention to our own well-being and thinking about how, in order for others to thrive, we need to thrive in our own leadership. And what a smaller group of the leaders that I work with, we decided to put ourselves into an experiment about thinking around how could we thrive together. And in the last few weeks, we actually took a pulse survey called Be Well, Lead Well. And this survey looks across 6 different dimensions. So around thriving, fuel, flow, wonder, wisdom, and thriving amplified. And the thriving amplified actually means how are you as a leader amplifying so that you can energize others and, you know, and allow them to really thrive and unleash the power that they have. And so during this journey, I think for me, it's been really understanding a lot more around, yes, sleep is really important, being outside is being important, but also the wonder and beauty of things and how you actually fuel your own soul in order to actually lead more holistically and from a whole human-centered perspective. So the experiment's still ongoing, but I think it's just something that are thinking around how is it and what is it that we're paying attention to, and how do we sense in the system where our colleagues are and how we can enable and support them to continue to have not endurance, but actually resilience, so you can continue to thrive in the work that we do. So one of the things that I had found, you know, through the time of the pandemic, you know, as we shifted a lot with our leadership, and I mentioned earlier around agile leadership and agile organizations, and this is really around how could we come together during the time of the pandemic and really focus on the things that are really critical and critical to patients from the perspective of whether that meant needing to put clinical trials in place super quickly and very fast, whether it meant making sure that medicines could reach the patients during that time, or whether it was also helping and support some of our frontline workers in the hospitals, and really thinking what's the role that we could play. But at this time, it was really allowing the employees to go where their energy was and really focus on what was very important to them, and to really focus on these patient critical activities. And I believe because of the way that we were moving away from this directing and controlling way of leadership, it really empowered our teams to be able to focus on what was important for them and what they thought would be bringing most value to the patients at this time. Now, empowerment was mentioned, you know, just earlier. And I think for me, this has been really thinking into what do we actually mean by empowerment? What does that mean to me? You know, what does that mean to me? And the visual here really sort of shows, and I think a little bit what has been alluded to around how you can have strength over others versus, you know, so where that power is versus, you know, from the perspective of how you're holding others up, you know, when your strength that lifts others up. And when we think about the word empower, it's actually meaning how you're giving power to others through holding them up. And a quote that really resonated with me when I was reflecting on this is around people who are truly strong lift others up. People who are truly powerful bring others together. And I love this photo, this visual of the fact of hands being joined together, because that brings the collective power. But in order to really empower others, it requires us to unlearn a lot around what we're trying to, what we've maybe, what's got us there in the past won't get us to where we need to be in the future. And as we see things like digital technologies coming, we see different ways, better understanding of biology and healthcare. We really need to be thinking, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry, about how we do things differently, but also how we lead differently. And I really, love that quote about, when you feel uncomfortable, then suddenly magic happens. Because for me, what I've been trying to strive with is more the getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, and I'm still waiting. Sometimes you're still waiting for that magic to happen. And so what I mean here about unlearning, so it's partly around letting go. When you're empowering others, trust has a different connotation, and it's no more around of, I used to spend, say, 2-3 years ago in a previous role, actually back in Europe, I would be looking at 250 slide decks, looking for details as to where people could have a different ambition with what they were doing with our products and medications, versus really thinking around what's this value and in the impact that we could bring collectively as an organization. So as a leader, it's requiring you to let go, to trust, and to step back, but at the other time also allowing others in. And as you allow others in, that's when the magic happens. That's when they start to grow and their capabilities really start to build. And that's when you actually start to think, okay, maybe now there's time for me to start thinking about putting my attention to other things where I can have a bigger impact as well. And so that's this piece about, how do you really need to unlearn some of the ways that we've led in the past. And this is the frame that I would say around as sort of moving into this different type of leadership that really helps me, and I think helps others in our organization. We call it VACC leadership, of which some of you may already be very familiar with, but it's around keeping in our minds as to what is that purpose, that vision that's much bigger than ourselves, that we can actually bring people to see that they want to be able to stand behind in order to think differently, and be able to actually, what we would like to do is for people to move towards the work that they feel most passionate about and compelled to do. So that's the vision around how can we have a fluid workforce so that people can work in a networked way and can work in a way where they're really focused on their vision and their purpose. The other one is really thinking about how do we be the architect as a leader, to really think about we're triggering sort of through this network breakthroughs by really learning and experimenting and trying different approaches with each other. And the coach, which is probably the area where I've needed to step into the most, particularly in the last 12 months, I would say, really about how we unleash the brilliance in people, in our people, in our leaders, by having really courageous conversations around what is it that maybe the leadership needs to evolve and change. What is it that they need to let go of in order to allow their organization to thrive and to bring more value to others? And then the last one is around, of course, the catalyst around how we can move together to catalyze in order to think about things, not just from our own perspective, but from one that's really around where we can have this true collective leadership, as opposed to, and this requires very much people putting their ego at the door and needing to think about what is more important versus say within one particular country, but really what's the bigger impact that we can have collectively as when we think around that as an organization. So I think really what, you know, as I just sort of close sort of from, you know, what I've shared, is coming back to the thought on resilience, is really thinking as we go through this time and the time that we have ahead of us and lead through this time, is about how do we enable others to be able to relate very openly to the challenges and really remain creative in the leadership. Because if you think and have this image of a brick wall, we have all of these different building blocks, but what holds us together is actually the cement that is between those building blocks, that is actually the cement that really is, you know, that relationship. And how do we lean into relationship during this time where things are maybe tough, but looking at other ways that we can enable to connect, empower, and really unleash the brilliance of the people that work for us and that we lead within our organizations. Thank you. And I will see if I can stop sharing. Oops, I can't hear you, Noor. I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. And many of us can relate to that. We are indeed very compulsive people, women. We want to dot the I's and we want to cross every T, but we are also not very good at looking after ourselves, you know, and that we need to think, because love yourself first before you love others. That's the thing. And the other thing I think we sort of got the sense of it, but I also wanted to add, is doing nothing sometimes is actually doing something. Think about that. Yeah. So very interesting insights. I wonder if anybody has questions. We could take, I think, 1 or 2 questions. And you know what you said about ego? Out with ego and in with eco.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the ego one is just something that I see so much, where it's actually the thing that probably gets in the way, can get in the way, really can get in the way. And until someone can really put, I mean, I know it's one of the sayings of put your ego at the door, but until people can, or leaders find the ability to put their ego at the door and have other motivations, again, that's where I start to see magic really happening and something special happening. But it's such a, I think it is such a tough one to coach someone through that, of being able to do that.
Yeah, and leaders are often very lonely at the top, more so women leaders. Any questions from the floor? You know how to reach out to Rachel. And if not, Rachel, thank you so much for bringing us down from all that level to reality, to say, where am I? What do I want to do? Who am I? And once I know, this is where I have the strength to help others.
Thank you.
So
Thanks.
You again. Thank you. And now we've heard so much this morning. It's such a lot to take in. And, you know, it sounds like storytelling, but really storytelling today is a new word. It's now a powerful teaching and learning tool. And one of our most leading storytellers is Yasmin Khatter. Now, Yasmin comes from a mixed heritage and has lived in 7 countries. There you see her, vibrant. And traveling to a quarter of the world, she shares powerful stories and has helped her sell, crowdfund, and speak to thousands. She has worked with brands like DBS, Salesforce, Excelor, LinkedIn, Credit Suisse, Club Med, Danone, Gojek, and more. She's helped leaders connect, stand out, and sell their ideas, and her clients include the 75 Fortune 500 individuals, as well as governments. all this while inspiring their teams and to attract more clients, and which eventually will lead to more business and better careers. Yasmin is a graduate in psychology and communications. She's also an aspiring armchair neuroscientist, be careful, who loves to study how to improve sales by applying science to the brain. She's also a lead researcher at the Sales Story Method. Yasmin has worked, comes from this whole background, which shows you how powerful her brand of storytelling is. So let's meet the unforgettable storyteller, Yasmin Ketta.
Hi, thank you, Noor, for such a beautiful introduction. I am so excited to be here, and I've loved so much what everyone has shared so far. And I feel like the missing component is understanding a bit of the psychology of why this is happening. And I think Rochelle started the discussion around that, and I want to dive a little bit deeper in this. So when I was asked to speak about this topic, how to overcome your imposter syndrome story, I wanted to just be quite honest with you, is I am still an imposter. And when I was growing up, I struggled so much with this because of the fact that I grew up in an environment where I am half Egyptian, half Singaporean. And when I would go to Singapore, I would be Egyptian. When I go to Egypt, I was Singaporean. And I was growing up in Saudi Arabia. So you can imagine that the labels were always like something was wrong with me. And I thought something was so wrong with me that I ended up getting a degree in psychology, honestly, just to try to figure out like, why is this happening? And a lot of times people forget that you might be a certain way, but that doesn't define who you are. So every speaker that we've heard today had to take decisions and choices to change what they had to do. And that's where they become into much more what I call the unforgettable authorities, is because they found that one reason, which is what Shih Ting and Cicely talked about, that makes them want to go from like wanting to quit to really stepping up into sharing why they are doing what they're doing. And I'm not sure if any of you have asked yourself this question before, but if you've ever asked, like, how come some people seem to defy the odds? Some people seem to get, no matter what they do, success after success. How come some women are becoming the pave makers and the change makers while others are not? And one of the things that people do not realize is that up to 8 out of 10 people struggle with these imposter thoughts every single day. Now that is huge. Because if you let that consume you, you are going to stay in the category of really focusing on the fact that like that becomes who you are. And what you find is most people who are staying in like the normal zone is because they let those thoughts become their truth. And today what I want to share with you is why that doesn't have to be your truth, and you have a choice to change that story. Now you are in the right place if you are looking to make a bigger impact. And most of the people who end up listening to my talks are those kind of leaders who want to make an impact, who want to lead with connection, with intention. And as you watch this, you're going to be able to learn some of those things. So I want to ask you, if you were able to let go of your imposter story, what could actually happen? What kind of impact could you make in your career? If you could let me know in the chat, I would love to kind of hear from you. What would it look like for you if you were able to let go of these noises in your head saying that, I'm not good enough, or I'm not able, and so forth? Would you be speaking?
Are you waiting for action?
Pardon? You can ask in the chat.
Okay.
Be more confident. All right. Reach out to more people, create a lot more new opportunities. I love it. Tried very hard to let go of this 4 years ago, and I moved to my current job I'm at, and I think I've done a decent job. I love it. Awesome. More liberated, more career advancements. So we all know that having that small shift, right? That's really small shift can be the difference of night and day. And one of the things that really trigger me, and it triggers me so much, is when I hear comments like, women just need to speak up, or, we just need to believe in ourselves. Because sometimes what is happening is the inner narrative that's happening for us is so much louder, and it is so unfair, and it is so unempathetic to be able to make those comments and not understand where someone's story is coming from. If you look at even like culturally, look at society, some people are going through their own sort of challenges. So when you're asking them to speak up, their narrative can be massively skewed, just like mine was. Because like at the time, I remember in university, I was asked to speak up in class, and I literally was so petrified. I stuttered for 10 minutes. And I was told, speak up. So I spoke up. And you know what happened? It didn't turn out very well. And if I let that be my truth, it would be a huge disaster for the impact that I wanted to create, and also for the life that I wanted to live. And the biggest change for me, the biggest shift that turned everything around was, I'm like half Egyptian, and I grew up in Cairo, which is an amazing city. It's absolute chaos. It's like living in Jakarta or Delhi. And the traffic is insane. So when I would go home, I would try to save time by crossing over this massive highway on the Nile. And one day I was crossing over and I fell. I fell on the highway, which is not a good idea because there's lots of cars there. But in Cairo, we have these small little micro buses, which drive like crazy. And all of a sudden I look up and I see two of them running my way. And it was to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, I guess this is it. I'm going to be gone. And I close my eyes and I wake up to someone yanking my hand and pulling me off the highway. It turns out the buses swerved around me. And that's when I realized that one of the things that let run my show for the longest time is the fact that I let this imposter story run the show. And in the end of the day, between life and death, or between, going ahead and getting to know myself a bit more, I wanted to choose a second one. And by doing that, so many magical things happened. I was able to, at the time of my first job, I launched a coaching practice. I've been able to build $2 million businesses. And just for fun during COVID, I even launched my first card game, teaching kids how to be safe against the virus. But that's just what happened to me and the life that I've been able to live. But through the work of working with thousands of leaders, and even going ahead and launching my own podcast to interview some of the stories, some of the scripts that people hold back, that they have had to overcome, I discovered what is the difference between what keeps people in terms of the unheard, the dead end leaders, and the ones who are really stepping up, the ones who are shining. And what it actually boils down to is not what you think. It boils down to a couple of things. It boils down to, first, learning how to speak, learning how to be impactful. Vihba talked about how we have to speak in a more muscular way. Actually, for me, it's not about a muscular way. It's about a way that is less confusing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. It's when we are speaking with clarity, when we're speaking with simplicity, when we are getting to the point and to help someone take a next step, it becomes so much more impactful. And if we don't understand that, we think, oh yeah, I'm not good, but actually we might not have the skills in place. And the second component is actually what is happening in our mind that we have to overcome, right? So I want to launch a poll right now, and I'm going to ask you guys to fill it up. But I want you to assess right now when you are speaking, and Naomi, are you going to launch a poll for me? Yeah, perfect. When you are speaking to people, do you find yourself getting people giving you blank looks? They're like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? Or do you find that sometimes you're a little bit fluffy in what you're trying to get across? Or do you find that sometimes the message you're coming across with is actually kind of confusing and overwhelming? Or do you find that, every time you're speaking, people kind of remember it, it's clear, it's simple? Or do you find that every time you say something, people are saying yes, yes, yes? And I'm going to give you a minute right now to put it in the chat, click on the poll. Which one would you assess yourself to be most of the time? Because put in mind, if I talked about, for example, board game night with my friends, I'm pretty unforgettable. If I talk to an audience which has no idea about neuroscience for an hour, I would be pretty much dead end. So we can obviously adjust depending on who we're with, but what would you say overall? How would you assess yourself? All right, I'm not sure if we can actually see the results, or how's that going, Naomi?
We have 42 responses so far, so we'll just give it 1 more minute and then I'll end it and you'll be able to see the results.
All right, amazing. And that's why I want to start off with this first before I go into the psychology of it, is because I don't want you to confuse the fact that like, oh, it's you know, like I'm not impactful, because you haven't learned how to do this. You haven't learned how to get to the point, right? And you haven't learned to make it simple for people to understand. And that's why when I work with leaders, we learn about not only the thinking styles of our audience, but also the communication styles. Because when we are speaking in one tone the whole time, the person in front of us might have a very different listening style than the one we were sharing with. So we have to align that. And the closer that we align that, the more we eliminate confusion. And that's where magic actually lies. So I think we can go ahead and just share whatever response is there, Naomi, so we can move on. All right, amazing. So obviously we're in a women leadership program, so it's fantastic. The majority of people here are in the storyteller community, right? So we know that is something that has already been resolved. Now, the next thing is, how do we also help the people in our teams go ahead and elevate to that level so that they're becoming more impactful? And that's where it comes down to the second point, which is how can we make our teams feel safe and secure? And we do that by understanding, first of all, what is preventing someone from speaking up, from actually getting the point across. And it is not so much because of what we think, it's because of how we think. I'm saying this again because I know it's going to be a little bit confusing. It's not so much about what we think, it's about how we think. And the biggest problem that is happening is most of the time, we have these horizontal thoughts, programs, and beliefs, and they are operating all the time. If, for example, like for me, when I was in university, I always thought I was not good enough. So because I thought I was not good enough, I always felt I had to work harder. I always felt that, you know, it wasn't going to work for me. I always felt that some people were lucky and some people were not lucky. And I ended up having so many thoughts, which I manifested because of my horizontal thought process. Now, the key thing is to realize that we are not our thoughts. We are not our beliefs. We are just the thinker of those thoughts and those beliefs. And once we get that, and we know the distinction between the two, it becomes a lot easier for us to go ahead and to really step up how we lead and how we are able to make a bigger impact. And as many of the leaders have, and other speakers have already mentioned today, it has to come with a bit of discomfort. Now, contrary to most people, I don't think it's about, you know, leave your ego at the door or eat the frog and all these things. Because if you keep on doing that the way that I did when I was in university, you might have these moments where you hit a wall, and depending on the kind of character you are, you might not try again. And that's why for me, it's more important that we get to a point, sorry, let me move the slide, where we understand that in our heads, we actually have two voices. And the voices is really comes down to the ego, and it comes down to the ego being the child version of our voice. It's sort of like the yapper, the one kind of like complaining about things and is operating in fear. And the part that most people do not realize is the ego voice in our head is a voice that was developed before the age of 7. So if you imagine us as kids, we are having this voice in our head, and this voice is our voice from what we see around us. It may not even be the truth. It might be our perception of the truth, and that becomes our truth. And then we have these thoughts that we think are correct, but actually they're just one way of how we look at the world. And that's why the ego is really designed to help us survive. So when we have those thoughts of fear, those are very normal reactions, because those thoughts are there to help us, you know, make sure that we're safe and secure. And that again is the key thing I want to emphasize, is that if we want to overcome our imposter story, how can we constantly create opportunities for us to feel safe and secure? Now, the higher self version is the adult version. It's the source. It's the one of courage. It's the one of thrive. It's the voices that make us feel like, oh yeah, I can do it. You know, I got this. Like, why not me? Those are the higher self voice that we all have. But then we have in our head a whole conversation where we're debating with our child version of ourselves, which is we call the ego. And then we're wondering what's wrong with me when nothing is wrong with you. It's just that you're not aware of the two different voices, and you're not aware that the thoughts that you have are not your actual thoughts. They're actually just one version of your thoughts. Now, this is really important because once we are aware of this, we are going to know the difference that will change our life. And for us to be able to get in the discomfort is because slowly, if we look at all the leaders who are here that are sharing, all the people that we're inspired by, it's not because they were one day born into those roles. Like, I loved very much what Rochelle and Behba were sharing. It's because they took one step at a time. You know, Rochelle could not be leading a regional team if she didn't lead the first national team. And that's why, for me, the tool that I think is more important is, can we build our own ladder of ability? Because once you've led one team, you're like, oh, I got this. Can I lead a bigger team? Can I lead a different country? And as we progress in our career, if we are managing and we are aware what the ladder we're in, we're able to open up and get so much more done. And that's why you're going to realize that actually, wow, like I can do so much more than I thought I was capable of doing, is because we took one step at a time. And for me, that was a massive shift because I had one amazing leader who managed me for 2.5 years, and his name was Tamer. And Tamer would push me, and he'd push me each time to take one step on the ladder. And the next thing I realized, I was managing a regional team, and it was because of him pushing me over the course of my career to really make me realize that, wow, if I can do this, I can also do this. And that's when I started to realize that the why not voice in my head was actually the voice that I wanted to listen to, and not the voice that I was afraid of doing sometimes. Now, as I'm talking about ego, you might have this thought in your head thinking like, oh my gosh, ego is bad. But ego is not bad. Our egos are not evil. Our egos are there for one purpose and one purpose only. It is there to keep us surviving. It is there to keep us safe. One thing most people don't realize is that, like, our egos are working out for us all the time. Our egos are like burning 800 calories a day doing absolutely nothing. And if our egos had a choice, we would sit on a couch, watch Netflix, and just eat popcorn all day, because that would make us feel safe and secure. And when we are managing organizations, we are managing teams, we have to realize when people are resisting any form of change, it's not because they're resisting, it's the ego in them that's resisting. And that ego needs to just feel safe and secure to take the next step on that ladder to see what's possible. So if you're wondering what the ego is, I'm pretty sure all of you know it. You may not have the right word for it, but the ego is the monkey mind. It's the ego that's always thinking about the worst case scenario. And if you don't train your ego, if you do not tame your ego, it will go insane. And the reason why most people don't step up, they don't lead, it's because the ego is running the show. And the ego is taking control of who they are. Now, the higher version is the one that is giving ourselves unconditional love. It's saying, you know, I made a mistake, but that's okay. I'm just learning. Or I messed up, but like now I know it doesn't work. It's the part that actually wants us to be happy. It wants us to be successful, to be wealthy. And it wants us to always feel good. So we all have a choice. We all have a choice to choose the voice that we want to listen to. And you're never going to be able to listen to one voice all the time. But between, you know, the ego, which runs away, or the higher self that welcomes opportunities, I want us to think, you know, which voice do you want? And which voice can you create for your teams to also want as well? Because the more we make things safe and secure for people, the more magic can happen. And that's why each step of the way, each step of what we can believe in goes up. And we're able to see what's possible just because we're taking those small steps and building that muscle to see what else is next and what else is possible.
Is that it, Yasmin?
That's it.
Thank you very much. And the magic of storytelling. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's important that we recognize that we have to manage our egos, but we have to be forgiving to ourselves, and we have to work constantly at knowing ourselves, what we want and who we want to be. Any questions from anybody? I think we might be able to take one question.
Sure, okay. Rachel, you mean this slide? I'm happy to also answer the question that you have around this.
Yes, thank you. Got it.
So the key thing to also just realize with the ego is that one of the ways to kind of cope with that, and one of the tools that I use, that I still use to this day, is I give myself my voices different names. So when I think about my ego voice, I literally, when in my head, I will actually say it out loud as if it's the childhood version of me. And when I hear that, I'm just like, that sounds ridiculous. And the more I hear that, it becomes like, okay, this is not going to serve me. It's not going to help me at all. So what else can I do?
Thank you very much. You know, my ego voice says, would love to hear so much, because it is so inspiring and it's working through us to examine ourselves in various ways. But the real voice says that we have to move on to the next session. And really, you have done a marvelous job in adding to what all the other speakers have said, because this is not a topic that is this or this or this. This is a topic of putting everything together with us right in the middle, examining our own circumstances and deciding what we want and how we want to do it. So with that, I want to say thank you so much again for that wonderful storytelling session.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much for having me here today, Noor.
Thank you. And now we go on to the next session, which is interesting because it's going to be a panel session. This is for the section on the next gen leadership, supporting and developing leadership talent. And we have a panel here led by Eliza Kang, who will take us through this session with her panelists. So she will introduce her panelists. But before then, it would be so nice to have you, Eliza. And you are freelance counselor, board member of AWARE. And you've spent 13 years in wealth management, advising clients on asset allocation, family office, and impact investments before leaving to pursue a master's in counseling at Monash University. And then you were hired as a part-time counselor at SMU, and you began your involvement in gender justice, interesting, and women's empowerment in 2007, volunteering in a microfinance consultancy in India. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and how the women empowered themselves, and an NGO fighting violence against women and the trafficking of women across the border in Nepal. Eliza has been involved with AWARE since 2016, and as a trainer with Catalyst Consulting, you're a counselor, a volunteer, a volunteer helpliner, and a project manager for the Women's Helpline expansion.
Gosh, looks like you read my internet profile, Noor. Thank you so much. You're too kind.
No, I just want to say that you're a full-time caregiver, family manager, and part-time counselor. And I'm wondering whether you ever cry when you hear these stories. So please.
Yeah, well, I think all of that to say that, when the typical time it came to have children, I kind of, ended up trying to figure out where I placed in the world and where, what my place was, how I could contribute in a way that wasn't in that straight career ladder. But I'm very grateful to have found a lot of purpose, a lot of inspiration in the work that AWARE does in Singapore. And for those who don't know the work of AWARE, AWARE is Singapore's 35-year-old first gender equality advocacy organization in Singapore. And a lot of our work is based on also the services that we do, whether it's through the Women's Helpline or through the Singapore's only sexual assault care center that mostly caters to women, but also for men in need as well, who suffer from sexual assault. And you know, we really try to see where Singapore could, you know, where we can help push and make progress on the policies that we have in Singapore with regards to gender equality. And this year we're very, very, you know, glad to see that that Minister Shanmugam and the government have been looking at making Singapore the year for the gender equality review and Singapore the year for SG Women. So I think that's enough about me for now. I'd really like to hear from our panelists. And you know, we have a big team today of panelists, and then we need to sort of get through everyone and get everyone everyone's comments in. And our topic today is developing the next generation of women leaders. So, you know, I think it sounds like that should be a foregone conclusion. But why is it taking so long? Maybe let's have a discussion about that. So, you know, I'd like to start maybe with inviting the panel to give a brief introduction of themselves. And I'll start with Colonel Koh, and then maybe we'll go to Disha. I'm following it on my picture. Disha, Tanya, Aying, Richard, and Elisa. My name's Elisa. Please, Colonel Koh.
Hi, yeah, you can call me Ewan.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Just a little bit about myself. I head the Joint Manpower Department in the Singapore Armed Forces. What that means is that I'm in charge of strategic HR. What I do is I work across the functions in the Singapore Armed Forces to understand the workforce needs both today and tomorrow. And then I craft the plans and the policies to get from point A to point B. Quite interestingly, last year, to provide dedicated focus on women, because women has been identified as a very important talent pool for us going forward. I actually also oversee the Women's Outreach Office that's been set up to sort of listen to our in-service service women, as well as do the outreach to understand what are some of the pain points, life cycle needs, and then to drive the initiatives that would better retain our women, as well as bring in more women into the Singapore Armed Forces. Prior to this, I was heading the current operations group. What I do is that I develop military options to support defense and national security objectives. And the last operation I was involved in is the ongoing COVID operation, where the SAF are deployed in support of some of our ministries. Yeah, that's all about myself.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Disha. I realize we're going to have to run through this quickly so we can talk.
Thanks, Rita. Yes, I'll be brief. So I lead Twitter's marketing efforts for Asia Pacific, and my teams are responsible basically for creating Twitter's story and raison d'etre for consumers and businesses in the region. I'm a global citizen. I bring diverse business experience, especially in the technology sector, having led functions and built diverse teams across more than 20 countries in the world. And prior to Twitter, I was at Google, where I spent a decade. In my last role there, I was launching and commercializing technology offerings for advertisers and publishers across Asia.
Thank you. Tanya?
Hi, I'm Tanya O'Brien. So I work for ANZ as CFO. I've been in...
Could you speak a little louder, please, Tanya? You're a little soft.
No problem. I'll just look at my volume. Oops. So been in Singapore around 10 years. I have responsibilities for teams across Asia, Australia, but have worked and been responsible for teams across Australia, Pacific, Europe and America, as well as those countries I just mentioned. I'm head of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative within the Singapore organisation. I'm a representative on the Women in Leadership Working Group for the Global Function, and I'm also the chair of a professional women's network group connecting women in New Zealand and Asia called Maya, which is part of the New Zealand Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. Aying?
Hi, I'm Aying Wang, working for Eaton Electrical Company, a very masculine business that I'm a business leader, so that's quite unique. My 2 points about me. So I was born in China, but grew up mostly in the US. So I have a technical degree. I have a PhD in physical chemistry. So today I manage a business. So, I'm not on any official women or diversity panel of the company, but I'm a constant supporter, sponsor, and advocate. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Yeah. Richard, go on.
Hi, thanks, Eliza. So yeah, my name's Richard Eardley, from the UK originally, 20 years in Ireland, and then moved to Singapore about 4 years ago. I work for a business called Hays. For those of you that don't know Hays, we're a global recruitment business in the kind of professional and technical space. And I head up our business in Asia. So we have operations in China, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia. That's my day job. My other job is that I am the chair of our Global Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Council, a body that we set up about 18 months ago. On the foot of work that I started to do with the team in Asia, just very, very briefly, when I moved out here, it was quite clear that we'd got great female representation in our business, over 65%. But then when we looked at leadership, it was down to 1 person on a board of 12. And funnily enough, that's kind of mirrored across our world globally. We've done quite a lot of work to start addressing that in Asia. And now I'm carrying on that work through the Global Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Council, and I lead that work for Hays on a global basis.
Thank you. Very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about leaders versus general representation. Elisa?
Yes, hi. So I am the APAC Managing Director for the Center for Creative Leadership. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar. We are a global organization just reaching our 50th anniversary. I oversee our offices across the region, that includes in Shanghai and India. Our headquarters are here in Singapore, where I am based. And at CCL, we have done decades of research on the topic of female leadership, many interesting studies and also books, including coining the term breaking the glass ceiling. So this is one of the areas we're very passionate about. I have been in Asia Pacific for 15 years. In a number of regional roles within the consulting and executive education space, and certainly excited to share today. We have done some recent research on female leaders in Asia, specifically within the last year here, and so I'll be happy to share a couple highlights from that.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that research, to hear more about that research. So let me start by asking this. When we talk about developing women leaders, why do we say that initiatives like sponsorship or mentorship or even leadership training is even important? What would happen? Why do we need that to develop our women leaders today? Ewan?
Hi. I think sponsorship, mentorship, and leadership is something that the military has been doing for a while now. It's structured into key junctures in our career points, and all three are important. I mean, you have to be given the leadership training, gives you the tools and the opportunities to practice. Mentorship gives you the mirror to give you feedback. And then obviously sponsorship gives you the opportunities to progress in your career. So that's something that we have done in the SAF. But I think for women, there is that bit where, so I mean for the SAF, we address it because it's done systematically for everybody. But maybe it cannot be a one size fits all, especially for women. And sometimes the men mentoring them may feel like, oh, I can't really speak to their personal experience, especially when they talk about work-life balance, and the men actually hold back. So what we have done actually is that we started setting up a service women network. So we assign every junior woman with a senior woman who that they can tap on as a resource. So I think for a male-dominated organization like the SAF, while we do that very well for the bulk of the population, I think having more female role models and those that are readily available to our junior service women is something that we need to do better.
Okay, thank you. I note that your point about having, instead of, because I guess there are traditionally more male leaders in the military than female, and they traditionally would have been mentors or sponsors for the younger female leaders to be, but it's a great insight, I guess, to have female leaders look after and mentor, be a big sister or be a female mentor to them. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that happens in the corporate world too. Richard, can you give some thoughts about, from your point of view in Hays, like what do you see is lacking in the sponsorship and mentorship opportunities among corporates today that is not really catering to women perhaps, or are they?
I think most organizations will have certainly coaching, training programs, possibly mentorship and sponsorship programs for all their leaders. The question really is, should there be specific programs for female leaders? My answer to that is yes, there should be, but you need to articulate why. And I think for me, the kind of analogy is that leadership is still, unfortunately, a very male-dominated club. I think most organizations now accept that we need to have more female leaders. So if you like, they have allowed entrance to the club, but they have neither changed the rules nor the environment of that club. So women who are entering leadership quite often find themselves in a very, very male-dominated environment. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why we need specific mentorship, sponsorship programs to support women in their leadership journeys, because they are navigating through what is still, unfortunately, a very male-dominated environment. And only really by giving that support do you improve your chances of women successfully navigating that environment. I think you also need to do other things. You need to change the rules of the club and the methods by which it operates. But I think certainly as a start point, acknowledging that your organization has an obligation to support women in their leadership journeys is a good start point.
So I'd like to dig into that a little bit, seeing that we have, I think Aying wants to say something. Aying, Disha, and Tanya, you're all also from, and of course you and perhaps that's why we're in this panel here, in pretty male-dominated industries, engineering, tech, banking, the military. I mean, where do you see the examples of how you can cater better sponsorship mentoring opportunities? How do you break the rules of that private club? I mean, can you give some examples maybe that might be from your organizations or that you've learned in other places? Maybe I can start with Aying because I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment on Richard's points. So I think just about now, everybody knows that it's the right thing to do to have a sponsorship and mentorship. To have data to support, right? It's about 10, 20%, in this company who does a good job on that. But I do have an example of a company who do not talk about that. I happen to work for 4 companies. 2 of them are doing very well on, talking about it, having a program. I think those numbers, like the women senior leadership, probably 10%, better than, average. But for these 2 companies I work for, who we do not talk about, women or diversity much at all. The women in leadership, I would say 2%, very low. So my point is that doing this might not work, but not doing that definitely does not work. So that's what my, my addition to this. So it's just to, for everybody's awareness, this is facts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like to comment on examples from their organizations where
I can go, Lisa, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
I think from a Twitter perspective, what we've seen is, in addition to women taking steps to build informal connections, which seem to be very, very normal, because traditionally men have networks in the corporate world and clubs, as Richard put it. We've seen from experience that mentorship and coaching needs, in order for it to be successful, we need to formalize such programs. So what we've done is we have dedicated what we call business resource groups, for example, at Twitter Women, which organizes internal and external industry networking, workshops, mentoring, and cross-industry coaching opportunities, which has proven to be really successful. Outside of, I would say, the one thing I would add is this kind of program also encourages female leaders to strive to be a mentor and sponsor, because it goes both ways. We have a lot of interest, but there aren't many leaders who are putting their hand up to mentor and sponsor, for example. And having programs like this has really helped get that pull factor.
Yeah, and if I can add, I mean, certainly from a corporate perspective, you know, certainly what we've seen is over the years, you see sort of structural changes. So, you know, there'll be policies, there'll be, actually there's even laws, you know, in respect of equality and support of women in the workplace and women leaders. But I think the real fundamental part, which really comes back to Richard's comment, is the club, right? And that if the masses at the top, if you've got the majority at the top, to change that, you really do need to ensure that we fast track that representation at the top, because unless we have that, you don't get that cycle of change. To Jish's point around having role models, you know, creating opportunities, having people think differently, it won't occur, because I guess my perspective is we had all these things put in place and it's still a glacial progress, and in actual fact it's gone backwards because of COVID-19, that if we don't make a step change here, you know, we are going to see that this goes backwards, not forwards.
I find that a really interesting, bold statement. I think what I'm hearing you saying, Tanya, is that then there is a case for pushing women to the top so that they're going to speak up as leaders representing that perspective and having that awareness.
Correct.
That's great. I think it's bringing me to the thought about norms, about societal norms and perceptions of what women or what men see as opportunities or lack of opportunities in the workplace. And I wanted to bring Elisa in to talk about this, because I know that they've done some research in the Center for Creative Leadership. Can you share a little bit about what you found in the research and what can be done?
Sure, Liza. Yeah, so in the last year, we looked across Asia Pacific, multiple countries, and really tried to understand more about, you know, is there equal opportunity, what's getting in the way? And we wanted to look at perceptions of men and women. And so there are many studies that have been done, but not that many were looking at the difference in perceptions between how men see it and how women see it. And so among the survey respondents, 59% of men and only 30% of women reported that there are equal opportunities in the workplace. I think we kind of could expect this. That's a 22% gap. If we compare Asia to the US, it's in line with another study there where we saw about a 29% gap. And interestingly, that gap is twice as likely in the tech sector for the men and women to have quite a big gap in how they see that. When it comes to the career barriers, women see a lack of support from men and the organization as much more of a significant barrier than the men do. And also we looked into the pay gap, and the perception extends there. Only 44% of the men we surveyed agreed that there is a pay gap in most workplaces, whereas 72% of women, okay, that's 28 or 30% difference, said, yes, there's a pay gap. And we, of course, know the gender gap is real. Here in gender pay gap is real, 15% across Asia, and it's about 14% globally. So I think equal opportunity means closing these gaps, the gaps themselves. But in order to close the gaps, we need to close the gaps in perception. While we ask women to sort of lean in, I think we heard about this from Yasmin earlier about, our inner narratives and what's holding us back. We call these the pull factors in the research. We also need to be looking at push factors, what's going on in the system. And there, I think we need to more actively ask men to lift their perception. So it's not just about women leaning in, but men lifting their perception that may be holding the female leaders back. Even in an event like this today, I think the majority are women. So to me, that is one big shift of how are men involved in lifting perception and getting into these push factors. And push factors have to do with things like gender parity policies, taking the bias out of selection and promotion. So these very hard structural things. And I think to really make progress on those, we see that the involvement of men is critical.
I think, I don't know what the panel thinks, but I find that really interesting, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So, in terms of, you talked about the push and the pull factors. So I'd like to talk about both, because they, on one hand, we hear that women in Singapore, we are actually the same, if not slightly more highly educated. We're just as educated as men are in Singapore, and slightly more women go into the workforce. But at some point in the late 20s, women drop out of the workforce and they stay there. They don't. There's not that much of a comeback. And I think there are a lot of narratives, pull factors, as you said, in our minds that keep some women from thinking about coming back to the workforce. It could also be things like PSLE in Singapore. That's something that's quite, education stress is real. And also then the push factors from men. And I'd like to hear a little bit more from the panel about, if you want to talk about either, especially what your companies might be doing with regard to tackling the push factors and creating certain positive policies that might mitigate this from happening. Can I ask maybe Disha to start?
Sure, thanks, Elisa. So I'll take the first one. I think in terms of, I completely agree. I think the burden of caring for vulnerable individuals like young children, sick or elderly, typically falls disproportionately on women. And this often results in reduction of working hours or even complete exit from the workforce, as you mentioned, after a certain age. And I think COVID-19 was probably a situation where we saw it exasperated, where increasingly women had to spend more time on family responsibilities. And this is something we saw all across Asia, including in India and also around the world, like the US. At Twitter, what we've seen is embracing, I would say, new and more inclusive hiring processes and working arrangements really went a long way in helping women be comfortable and wanting to work at the company. For instance, I think remote hiring was one of the biggest organizational changes we did, because it was a tremendous opportunity where you could work from anywhere. Outside of that, we also had to kind of reinvent onboarding, working processes. All of that had to be rewritten so that it gives flexibility, especially to caregivers, depending on when they had time to work. So I think at Twitter, we are fully supportive, irrespective of role or situation, whether they want to work from home, for example, or split their time between home and the office. We're committed to providing employees complete flexibility to determine how and when they want to work, depending on their family situation.
Ai-Ying, what do you think? In the engineering industry, do you see change happening slowly, or are you able to, in your position of power, help to influence some positive policies or even encourage more women to keep from pull factors? You're on mute.
First, I work in China now for Eaton. So Eaton has done a lot of good work. So I'd like to share two things, So one is that, before I say that, so I heard Elisa talk about Singapore. In the school session in China, we are very much there. 50% of women are in school, just as much as men, education-wise. Actually, for China, even entry work, like an entry level, we are also very high, 50%. But quickly as we move up to the director level, that's when the number drops. So at Eaton, we recognize that. So actually HR and other functions organize a program called Women in Leadership for lower level women. So during that program, so we recognize two things, I would say. First, a lot of time this is really on ourselves. So for this group, the biggest hurdle actually is confidence and awareness or willingness. Like, so cultural reason or other reason, so they feel hesitant. So Eaton want to change that. So we introduce programs, for example, the sponsorship. I think, so I think we talked early. So without those programs, as I shared early, these people would stay where they are because they don't see anything differently. But with the sponsorship, with active mentorship, so women would step out. I think this program is in action right now at Eaton. Related to this, like I'm one of the sponsor, right? I'm one of the examples. So I'm constantly invited to speak, to mentor. So this can touch on another topic that people talk about, so we need to see examples. I need to let people know that you can major in science. You can do different things. You can manage a business. You can have kids. It really is a choice. And of course, with the support from home and work. So that these part of things I think has been successful. Another quick one is that, how we enlarge the pool is recruiting. So in recruiting, so what we do is like we make sure the pool has a woman or a percent of women representing the market. For example, the market has about 30% of women. So for us, the pool has to have 1/3 of the candidates women. As far as we hire women or not, so that up to the qualification. By doing this, I feel really good that we do not lower standard at all. So we hire qualified women, so we really achieve, I would say, effective equality in this way. So that's two practices I like to share, like have program for the lower level and, practice the recruiting practice.
So help women believe that they can do it, that they can come into they can do well, they can get support. What about the other side of the equation, Ewan and Richard? How do we work on the perception of men?
Go on, Ewan. I'll follow you.
Yeah, so that resonated with me. I think we can't wait for the day when, when more women make it to leadership position, then they can advocate for the rest, right? We can't wait for that day. We had to start by changing the men and find male advocates.
Yes.
And actually, a lot of the male senior officers I talked to, actually, they are also wondering why there are not more women. And I think a lot of them just have blind spots that need to be pointed out to them, that, boys and girls are different, that just like some of the speakers have shared, like Cecily, that, the girl sitting in the room, she may know the answer. She may have the best answer, but she, girls are taught to be nurturing team players, and you have all these voices in your head and that you may not choose to speak up. And then sort of, because what is defined as leadership is sort of, somebody who's very confident, who speaks a lot in the boardroom, ladies get discounted as being leader-like. So actually what I found is that, advocacy and sponsorship is incredibly important for women. That, I've had to tell some of the senior officers that, no, she knows her stuff. And, and once you start to point out, women are good, but they display in other ways, they start to look out for that. And And I see that that has started to take root where, you know, it would be good if I am able to advocate for women. It would be even better if a male officer advocate for women.
I'm just reminded of a short anecdote about how in a boardroom, you know, a woman may speak and then the man may just either ignore what she's just said or would sort of say something similar. And then the tactic for that, was that from Sheryl Sandberg? The tactic for that is for another woman in the room to repeat what that woman just said. It's like, I think she just said that. And so that the men can hear that as well.
Yes, because women somehow feel shy to praise themselves, but it's all right if another woman praises her. That's right.
Oh man, let's do some male advocacy here as well, isn't it? Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're asking what are the things that I've seen have an impact and have made men more aware of these issues, and this is from our experience in Hays. We started out having these discussions, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, really seriously, and everybody's, and this is largely the male leadership's response was, well, you know, it's meritocratic around here, it's performance-based, so it's the same for everybody, you know, there aren't any real issues. And yet you just had to look around the boardroom and say, well, clearly there are, because there's like 12 blokes and 1 woman. And are we saying that blokes are 12 times better than women? Because that would be the logical conclusion to your meritocratic argument. And everyone goes, oh, no, we don't mean that. Well, in that case, there's a problem. So going back to what Eliza was saying, you know, she came up with lots of sort of data and statistics there. Gathering data and establishing where the problems are and what those problems are, that's had the most profound impact on our organization. We've done a significant, we're in the middle of it now, significant kind of data gathering exercise across the world, both quantitative and qualitative. So we've looked at all our leadership by every single level, and we've cut it by data, by gender, so we can see where in the kind of leadership pipeline the bottlenecks are, and they're clearly there. You know, it's evident for everybody to see. But then you need qualitative data, because people look at that and they make assumptions. They say, oh, well, it's at the senior levels. So when people are a little bit more advanced, maybe in their late 20s, 30s, so it's probably a family thing, and women are, you know, choosing to go off and have families. And there might be some cases where that is true, but then you need qualifying data and information to test that. And an interesting story, we had that exact experience in one of our big countries where the assumption was that it was a personal choice issue. So we went and surveyed all the senior women who'd left the organization. And the starting assumption was, well, they'd left at the time that they'd started a family, they hadn't come back from maternity leave, so maybe they'd exited the workplace. And no, they'd all gone back to work, but they'd chosen to go to other places with less aggressive male environments. So it wasn't I'm leaving work, it was I'm leaving you guys because I don't like what I see when I look around the boardroom and the behaviors that we see. So that's the kind of qualitative data that we need. And where we're getting that, we're getting statistics like Eliza was saying, where we're seeing that, you know, engagement is so much at a lower level among females than males in a lot of places. And we're getting, you know, verbatims from people describing their experiences. And then you sit down with the leader of that region or that business, who is more often than not a bloke, and you say, well, look, here's your data showing your bottleneck, and here's all the qualitative data showing what people are experiencing at work. And once you lay that in front of them, in my experience, most of them have that kind of light bulb moment of, oh, okay, so this, you know, having a meritocratic workplace isn't enough. We need to do more than that, because clearly some people are experiencing difficulties. And then the final piece, I think, around really accelerating change, and I think Tanya was saying earlier, we need to accelerate change because its progress has stalled, is the debate around setting targets for an organization. And that was a real hot potato when we started discussing it. And people were instinctively, oh, well, we're not sure we want targets, because then you might just be promoting people just because, rather than, you know, they're the right person for the job. But we've now broached that, if you like, and we now agree as an organization that targets are vital to accelerate change. And I think I'd be interested to hear some of the opinions of the other panelists on whether their organizations have set targets. Do they set targets or quotas? Aying was saying about having balanced shortlists. That's one form of having a target. I think you need targets both at all levels, at the pipeline level of who's coming into the organization, but then on the progression level, right the way up to the very top. And I think you need to say, this is what we want our boardroom to look like in such a time scale. And until you do that, people don't take you seriously. It just becomes a load of nice things to do to make you feel better, but is it really going to affect change? Most businesses work towards targets. So if you don't put a target around gender balance, then you're kind of signaling that you're not that serious about it.
Brilliant. That was really helpful, Richard. Lots of really good data. And I think, you know, we've got feedback from the audience that, you know, they love how it's a data-driven approach, you know, both from Eliza and yourself. I'd like to hear from Tanya, because I know she had something to say about targets and quotas in organizations. And maybe you can share something from either your personal perspective or ANZ.
Yeah, so look, within ANZ, we do have targets, and I think that, actually I might just go back on something that Richard was talking about before, just as an observation. You know, we have similarly an issue with mid-management women to senior management, you know, so we go from a sort of a ratio of 50% to, you know, 20%, you know, and we did a data research as well. And what was interesting was two things, and Richard touched on them. One was when our women mid-managers looked to our senior managers, they looked at work-life balance, and what they felt was that as a senior manager, you were asked to commit more of your time, and they didn't want to do that because they wanted work-life balance. And the second thing was actually not the capabilities, but what was valued. What does success look like? What were those things that the senior managers, which are predominantly male, what were they displaying, and that was taken as being successful? So there was sort of this aggressive, technical, not people-focused type capabilities, if you like, and they combined those two things and said, no, that's not what we wanted to do. I'm happy to stay as a mid-level manager, or to Richard's point, I'll go and work somewhere else where you know, that culture is different. Going back to the target setting, we have them and we've not been successful. So I think the other part of this is consequence. So notwithstanding that it's sort of become a popular thing for boards, for senior executive teams to say we have these targets, they consistently don't meet them, and nobody cares. And we move on to the next year and we don't meet them again, and nobody, you know, it's sort of, you know, there's a question around consequence. And I must admit, I'm becoming slightly more militant now in respect of, you know, targets and quotas. I think that we have to become a lot firmer on them, and there should be consequences in respect of not meeting them, because we won't move the dial otherwise, is my real fear.
Is that something that other organizations are looking to do more, consequences?
We have a target. In addition, like I said, our target actually is a percent of women leaders by levels. So in order not to make that target look like a quota, so we add other targets. I remember I talked about recruiting. So we make sure we have the right people in the pool. So as we do really good education, because we don't want, we want to achieve 28% women. It's a compromise. In sales, saying that, oh, you know, I need a woman in my team, so so this one's not bad, maybe I should hire her. So that's the way I give him a lesson on what really you know, inclusion and you know, and equality means. So you need to be open-minded, look at, you know, women, so you definitely, you know, use the same standard, not compromise on these things. So it's a very I guess a tough balance. Without the target, as I said, other companies I work for, no target, no woman, okay? With a target, you need to be really careful not to lead to misinterpretation, yeah.
Elisa, I think on the consequence piece, one thing from Twitter that might be interesting is we've made sure outside of having really transparent and accountable goals, like I think many other companies have mentioned as well. From a consequence perspective, it's more making sure that leadership at every level of the organization, including managers, etc., have these as personal goals that they need to meet on a quarterly basis as well. So it's not just the organization having one goal overall, but how does it then trickle down at every level? And that's what we've seen really work. I think we've explored many ways, and I think progress is never fast enough, as we've heard from everyone, around metrics and outcome-based metrics for impact. And it can be done using pay equity, the promotion process. In fact, when we did a pay equity one recently, what was really great to see, the results of our analysis revealed that tweets across the board, across gender and across all levels of the organization were paid 100% equitably, which is absolutely amazing to see around the world. We've also, for example, also have task forces, which we call it the Consistency and Fairness Task Force, which has been launched to review, for example, promotion process across Twitter to disrupt potential biases. For example, having a data-informed promotion readiness pipeline, along with the makeup of what kind of calibration are we looking at, the process, committees, etc. So various checkpoints have been put in place, which also have consequences attached to it.
That's great. I think that I'm told that we are running out of time and we want to open it to questions, which am I supposed to pass it over to you, Noor? Because there's a great question here from Isabel Ireland. Do you want me to deal with it? Do you want me to do it? Okay. You're on mute, but I've seen your head nod, so I'm gonna. Yeah. So I think Isabel was asking. Actually, it follows up with what you're saying, Disha, on another level. What do you think about more transparency around salaries across the organizations?
100% agree. Isabella, I could not agree more. In fact, what we're also working towards when it comes to pay transparency is making sure we share pay bands. So not just like, is it equitable or not, but what are the pay bands across all levels and genders for individual positions? And this is something we will be doing starting 2021.
That's great. Anybody else doing that?
Yes, Elisa, I'm sorry. So we have the same spelling of our name. Everyone's figured this out right now, but she's Eliza and I'm Elisa. So we're even keeping it straight. We have introduced it as well. We've just done an analysis across CCL, starting with North America and providing full transparency of our bi-level pay equity. And so we do believe that pay transparency, not just for gender, but other aspects of diversity, is going to be important going forward. We started with the US, so we haven't gotten to Asia first. And so absolutely, we're going to do that. Just one other point I wanted to make specific to Asia, what we experience here, and from another piece of research in 2018, that we saw, and this is true globally, but even more so in Asia, one of the strengths of female leaders is around being tactical and getting things done and taking care of everyone and everything. And we basically end up seeing that it results often in a generosity burnout, okay? And so this is more of a pull factor again, but one of the things we've observed is that asking for help from both men and women at various levels in the organization, help to access network, create connections, open doors, is something that women are very reluctant to do. And I think in the scenario we talked about before with having to take care of kids and their exams and schooling here in Singapore, that sort of switch around recognizing just how tactical women tend to be, often at the expense of saying, well, what do I really want or what's important to me? And I think that also should be something that's not only with the women, only the responsibility of the women. We need the men. And on targets and quotas, absolutely, we've seen some form of that needs to be in place, and people need to be held accountable at different levels. They need to have it in their goals. I think what everybody said, it all really comes together.
Thank you. This generosity burnout, I think that's really interesting, and I resonate a lot with what you're saying as well. So, I think we've learned a lot this session. I'm told that we're running out of time. We've run out of time. I'm quite amazed at how efficient we've all been, all six panelists on here, and to be able to cover so many interesting topics. And I'm glad I don't know, but I'm hearing that what's going to come is that organizations are all going to start being transparent about salaries, and that's going to help definitely, at least with the wage gap. You know, really appreciate all of your insight today, every one of you, and yes to a data-driven approach. Let's bring that out there. I will end off with this. I wanted to bring the last topic in, but we didn't have time. But Aware also did a research lately surveying 1,000 respondents on workplace sexual harassment in Singapore. And contrary to what we expect, women in senior roles face more workplace sexual harassment than juniors, whereas 10% of non-managers receive promises of enhanced career prospects in return for sexual favors and threats to their career prospects if they didn't return unwanted sexual advances. Managers reported experiencing these at double the rate at 21%. So, you know, I'm just putting that out there. We didn't have time to talk about it, but that's some data for you to think about and things that we have to tackle going forward. The road is long, but where the arc bends towards it, or towards justice, as they say, right? Thank you so much, everybody. Noor, I think you're still on mute.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Noor, you're still on mute, Noor.
Is it okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, as I was going to say, thank you so much, Eliza, for so competently handling this wonderful team of 6, and with a broad range of discussions, which are so, I mean, everybody touched on bits and pieces of this, but I think you and the team drilled down a little bit more. The message is very clear, very, very clear. There's lots to be done, much, much more than is being said. So with that, I want to thank all of you again, and over to Taylor to tell us about the next event.
Thank you, Eliza. We are just about to go into our networking lunch. So how that will work is we will break up into 3 breakout rooms. So please choose one. So this will just act like a informal discussion like we would have at any in-person event. So if you would like to join, please do stay here so you can engage in some chit chat. And then we will come back at 12:55 to start our Climbing the Leadership Ladder workshops. There will be A, new leaders, B, middle to senior management, and C, top level management. Thank you, Noor. Thanks, everyone. Please do stay if you want to engage in these discussions.
Just one thing, there will not be lunch delivered to you.
Unfortunately not. Sorry.
Thank you. Everybody knows who their respective, the respective leaders are for each of the sections?
Yes. And we will also have this on a slide so everyone can see as well.
Excellent. So we'll be back at about 1:30, 1:35.
12:55.
Oh, sorry, 12:55, yes. All righty. Thank you so much and have a wonderful chat session.
Thank you.
Hey, hi. I'm a little bit confused. So they come back at 12:55, and then what happens? Oh, I'm sorry.